The boy desperately shouted after the retreating people, begging them to bring any magical means, a potion or healing magic that could save his sister, tearfully repeating the word help, hoping for at least the slightest help. One of those who heard the young man's pleas stopped and thoughtfully said that magic is an ancient art that can change the very nature of the universe, adding that if the young man wishes to comprehend this knowledge, then they are ready to pass on to him the full depth of their skill and experience. In the kingdom of Santia, in the village of Sylv, a young man has been practicing swordsmanship for 6 years. His home village survives on hunting. It is located right on the border with the kingdom of Gaisan. He wonders why the villagers train exclusively with bows and swords. In addition, the boy was tormented by curiosity about the lack of magic among the villagers. The master looked sternly at the young student, reminding him of his name, Ainz, and firmly said that it was important to maintain a firm stance, move faster and act more energetically. The man then suggested that perhaps the student lacked a natural talent for wielding weapons, or simply lacked the internal motivation and desire to truly dedicate himself to the art of combat. Suddenly, Ainz decided to demonstrate something unusual to his teacher. He created a tiny flame or a small stream of water right in the palm of his hand. The trainer responded with disdain, claiming that magic was absolutely useless in combat and asked him in bewilderment why he was so interested in it. The coach decided to resume the training process and organize sparring today. He told Rositz and Bag to prepare for the fight. The guys took a fighting position, taking the correct stance. The atmosphere was heating up, the athletes were determined. When the fight began, the spectators watched in admiration at the skill of the senior students, understanding the full power and accuracy of their blows. Ainz knew that these were just wooden swords, and if he were to fight, he would simply burn the enemy's sword with fire magic, or use earth magic to envelop the enemy's legs, making them unable to move. He desperately missed studying the magical arts. The teacher announced that the next ones to fight would be Signs and Ainz. The opponent asked the boy to prepare himself, because he definitely wouldn't lose to such a weakling. Ainz declared that he would fight using magic, and as a result, he lost. The winner was not happy about the victory. The others were surprised and wondered why he decided to use magic and were worried if he was okay. The boy was glad that he at least had medicinal herbs and assumed that if he had healing magic, he would immediately heal all his wounds. He then decided to use water magic to create some ice cubes and apply them to his head. He hoped that even such a simple measure would help ease the throbbing headache a little and allow him to focus on what was to come. The young man hurried to notify his mother of his return home. She warmly congratulated her son on his return and continued to prepare dinner, creating a cozy atmosphere of family warmth and care. The woman kindly sent him to wash his hands before eating, warning him that dinner was almost ready. Ainz lightly raised his hand, casting a short spell, and a shining cloud of clear water appeared around him. The water gently washed over his hands, washing away the dirt on them. He then summoned a gentle breeze, which gently dried his hands. Suddenly the father came in, looked at his son carefully and proudly noted that the boy had already grown up. The young man with a slight smile asked his parent if it was true that he was now really that big. The man noticed a large bump on his son's head and worriedly asked what had happened to him. Then, smiling slightly, he joked that he had really been hit again. The boy was in pain, he only grimaced in response, trying to hide his pain in front of his father. The wife looked sternly at her husband and firmly told him to stop bothering the baby with his jokes and pranks, adding that it would be nice to go wash his hands as well. Kirza quickly agreed to the request. Then the father explained to his son that it was because of his pranks that his mother was so angry with his dad. The boy asked in bewilderment how he could have been the cause of his mother's displeasure. The father explained that it was not about him personally, but about the funny bump he accidentally got on his head. And suddenly, unexpectedly, Lena gave her husband exactly the same bump on the head, sternly informing him that he was now urgently going to wash his hands. Ainz laughed loudly, happy that his dad now had the same bump, and pointed his finger at it, laughing at what had happened. This became a familiar part of their close-knit family's daily life, a kind of tradition that was maintained day after day. This is how the young men spent their everyday life, filled with fun family adventures, sincere emotions, and support from each other's loved ones. Ainz went to bed that evening, snuggling comfortably in his bed, immersed in a world of peace and sleep. And then he opened his eyes and found that the night had flown by unnoticed, and the night of the next day had arrived. A little boy woke up early in the morning and immediately began to loudly call for his mom and dad, but saw that the room was completely dark, making it impossible to see the surrounding objects. When he tried to carefully go down, his foot caught on an unknown object, and the young man fell. It turned out that the cold and motionless object the boy had stumbled upon was the body of his own mother, lying next to him on the floor, completely motionless. The young man instantly froze. His heart sank with horror and incomprehension. His consciousness refused to perceive what was happening. Opening the door of the house, the boy was horrified to discover a terrible scene of chaos and violence unfolding right on the street. People rushed among the destroyed buildings, desperately calling for rescuers to come to their aid. One woman sobbed, calling in vain for her little girl, who had disappeared amid the panic and chaos. Rosen and Bag angrily shouted threats, warning the perpetrators of the disaster that they would soon bitterly regret the crime they had committed. Suddenly, 2 young men were killed right before the shocked boy's eyes. Horror gripped the young man. His thoughts were confused, and he could not comprehend what had happened. Raising his eyes, he noticed a frightened boy quickly running away from the scene of the tragedy. His figure flashed between the debris. The boy was being chased by a man. Ainz thanked God that Ainz managed to escape, but then something irreversible happened. The pursuer caught up with the unfortunate teenager right before the eyes of the observer, who was standing literally a few meters from the scene of the murder. The observer froze, struck by the horror of what he saw. Ainz stood motionless, dumbfounded by the enormity of what had happened. Fear and a feeling of utter helplessness grew within him. Fear and shock consumed him completely, creating a feeling of complete loneliness and loss of bearings in this new reality. The magician guessed that there was probably another survivor hiding nearby, and so he decided to approach him, asking why he remained in place and did not try to hide quickly, given the proximity of mortal danger. The man said that all the boy's friends and relatives were dying one after another, and he himself was not going to flee or fight. He thought that the child would not ask for his life either, and decided that he had simply accepted his fate. The magician noted that all the dead had tried to fight, and wondered why the man standing before him did not want to do the same. Ainz sat on the ground, completely motionless, his shoulders slumped, his gaze unseeingly fixed somewhere into the distance. His face was completely emotionless, as if all the life energy had left his body. Time had stopped for him, and the chaos around him no longer mattered. The man assumed that the guy wanted to distract his attention, but soon realized that the reason for this behavior was deeper. The killer openly admitted that he was absolutely indifferent to the fate of the victim, since her fate was predetermined in advance. However, after some time, the criminal came to the conclusion that the murder of this particular person would seem too boring and ordinary to him, because the victim turned out to be far from as proud and strong in spirit as his previous opponents. The criminal, with a cynical grin, stated that every time he used his most powerful spell, Lightning Bolt, he invariably noticed one curious phenomenon: the faces of the victims acquired an expression of deep amazement and genuine delight in the power of magic. After this confession, the attacker concentrated and launched a deadly spell aimed at destroying the young man. The caster said that it was an attack spell, and added regretfully that it was a pity, of course, that the boy did not want to run away like his friends. The man coldly ordered the young man to hurry up and end his meaningless existence as quickly as possible, showing absolute disregard for other people's lives. With a cynical laugh, he mockingly commented on the situation, as if he derived pleasure from the suffering of another person. The child was complaining that he was in pain and asking where his dad was. Silica turned to her companion, saying that the child was still alive and needed help, asking him to help him and clear away the rubble. The man expressed doubt, wondering if the child was alive, assuming that it was not. He sighed heavily and quietly said that the baby was practically on the verge of life and death, barely holding on to a thin thread of consciousness. 3 days later, in one of the houses, 2 little twin sisters excitedly pulled at the elegant skirt of an adult woman, exclaiming with delight that the boy had finally opened his eyes and come to after a long sleep. Their ringing voices filled the space with joy and relief, enlivening the atmosphere of the house. They asked Silica what to do next, as they were surprised by the miracle that was happening and discovered that they had spilled hot water on themselves. The woman felt great relief and joy when she saw that the boy had finally woken up after a long period of oblivion. The girl asked her mother in surprise if the boy didn't understand them. She explained that he was also from the village of Sylv. Silica gently explained to the boy that he was now in the village of Tas, and that his home village had been destroyed and no longer existed. The boy sadly confirmed that he was already aware of the loss of his homeland. The interlocutor continued the conversation, mentioning that, alas, apart from the young man himself, no one from the village survived the disaster. Upon hearing this news, the boy quietly confirmed that he was well aware of this. She continued speaking, adding that the boy lost an arm and a leg in the crash. The young man said again that he knew about it. Silica asked how he knew about all this. The young man answered that he saw everything with his own eyes. The boy repeated that he had seen absolutely everything, but now he could not see anything with his right eye. The woman suggested that it would be better to leave him alone. The daughter agreed and asked his name. He replied that his name was Ainz. The girl called this beautiful name and said that her name was Silica, and this was her mother, Korea. She decided to bring him breakfast and asked him to wait a little. Ainz realized that it was an attack spell, exactly what he was looking for. He thought that it required special words to use, but he guessed that it might be something else. Deciding to test his theory, he tried to reproduce the lightning that the man had used. Then he realized that nothing was happening, and he realized that something was wrong. After all, it was easy for him to use water magic, and the young man assumed that in order to master the new magic, he needed to study it thoroughly. Then the guy created water, shaped it into a ball, then pointed it at the man and released it. In the end, it worked. Now the young man decided to use fire, believing that seeing the consequences would make it easier for him to imagine the end result. And he convinced himself that he needed to clearly imagine the raging flame. Ainz asked himself to imagine a flame that burns everything in its path. Suddenly, Silica came in and said that she brought him hot soup. Suddenly the girl screamed that a fire had started. The boy immediately felt the unbearable heat filling the room and resolutely demanded that the fire be put out immediately. While Silica was amazed at how intense the heat was, Ainz finally realized how important it was to clearly imagine the end result of the spell. Because, as the man said, it's all about the power of imagination. The guy found this extremely interesting. Silica got angry at him for this statement, adding that nothing of the sort. The young man decided that if she wanted, he could tell her more about magic, but the girl refused his offer. She started to say that he had just woken up and was already doing magic. She asked if he even thought about his home, family and friends, and if it really didn't bother him at all. Silica said that the boy was still very young, he was only 6 years old, and she was 12, and from that moment on she decided to become his older sister, so now let him live here. The parents said that they also did not mind. She knew this child was completely broken. He had lost a leg, an arm, and an eye, and his heart was full of wounds. They found him barely alive, so she decided she had to help him heal his emotional wounds. 2 days later, the boys went outside to get some fresh air. One of the children playing scornfully declared that there was a stranger here again. The children shouted loudly, demanding that the stranger immediately leave their village. Silica asked the children to stop throwing stones. Seeing that she was angry with them, the hooligans suddenly hurried to hide away from the scene. The sister asked if everything was okay with her brother. He replied that Mrs. Korea had carefully wrapped him up warmly, which meant that it was probably chilly today. The girl explained that she was not talking about the weather at all, but about those who had offended him. The boy confidently reported that nothing terrible had happened. And he doesn't even pay attention to their antics. The girl was curious if the boy was really so indifferent to everything that was happening until they finally got to the right place. The boys approached a giant ancient tree, standing alone in the middle of an endless field. His sister asked if it was okay to leave him here. Ainz expressed his gratitude to the girl. As usual, she decided to wait right there, and the young man went to practice. Silica remembered his words about wanting to practice magic and being interested in a quiet place nearby. That's why they come here every day. At first, the girl was extremely surprised by this decision, but gradually she came to the conclusion that she had already gotten used to this routine. Then her brother thanked her and added that there was enough practice for today. Accepting his thanks, Silica modestly replied that it was nothing. Meanwhile, the boys turned their attention to the excited crowd that had gathered nearby. Their father suddenly called out to the children. The girl turned to him worriedly, asking what exactly had happened. The man explained that the children had gone into the forest and that none of them had returned home to this day. Silica wondered why they had gone there at night. There are monsters there, after all. Evan asked the villagers to gather together and go looking for the missing children. He himself sent his daughter and son home, instructing them to get ready. Ainz firmly asked the man to allow Silica to accompany him, assuring him that he was fully capable of getting to his home on his own. Evan apologized and invited Silica to follow him. The girl asked the guy to wait for them to return home. At this point, the young man became interested in finding out whether the animals living in the forest were able to use magical abilities. Ainz activated the spell, Even the Storm Can't Stop Him, by using the ability Accelerate. The boy quickly rushed forward, leaving behind him a group of children in strollers, whose small faces were full of bewilderment and surprise at the sudden disappearance of the stranger. As he headed into the forest, Ainz realized that he was there for the first time, realizing the need for special caution and attention. He couldn't see anything, so he decided to activate the spell that was supposed to take him out of this pitch darkness and grant him perfect vision and hearing, and then he turned on the search mode. Ainz realized that there was a lot of stuff there, and that there was something big in front of him. The boy decided to try water magic and apologized to the beast for not holding back, and then activated the spell, Water Blade. The enemy was very angry and continued to growl loudly, outraged by such insolence. The father begged his daughter to quickly deal with the monster because he could no longer hold it back. The man added that even with two of them, it was very difficult to fight. Then one of the companions happily reported that they had done it, and called it a great job. Evan knew that this was just the beginning and they needed to move further into the forest. Silica was worried about Ainz and regretted leaving him alone because if he went into the forest he would be in mortal danger. At this time her brother laughed, dealing with monsters. The boy continued to laugh, hitting all the enemies, and realized that no matter how many people he lost, no one knew about magic and he was very sorry. And then suddenly he found a hut nearby. As he approached the hut, he felt no signs of life here, and the monsters did not even dare to approach this strange place. Ainz thought that there must be something magical hidden in the hut, since even monsters were afraid to approach it. Inside were the same hooligans who were perplexed why, of all the residents, it was the cripple who came. The young man realized that it was good that they had not seen anything. He was also sad to leave this amazing place, full of secrets and adventures, but the guy knew for sure that he would return later. Now, looking at the confused and frightened children, he calmly ordered them to get up and go back to the village. They said that the forest was full of monsters, and did he really think that they could escape from them? Ainz calmly said that he had already risked his life to find them and ordered them to return back. The little children thought it was a joke, and the savior had definitely gone crazy. But when they saw the monsters, they got scared, decided that they were finished, and started screaming, warning him of the danger and saying that now everyone would die because of him. The young man asked them to shut up immediately. Ainz decisively activated the powerful spell, Ice Hell, sending icy energy streams straight at the ferocious beast. The monster was instantly engulfed in ice, turning into a motionless statue covered in ice crystals. The children stood in complete amazement, their eyes and mouths wide open, looking at the glittering ice shell surrounding them. They could not understand where this cold wall came from, as if it had appeared out of nowhere, and why the entire space was suddenly filled with ice. Suddenly, the monsters disappeared, defeated by the young man. The children looked at the hero with delight, feeling relief and joy from the successful completion of the terrible test. Their faces lit up with a smile of relief. They happily jumped around, rejoicing at the happy ending of the catastrophe. Evan happily patted his son on the head, and his sister worriedly slapped the boy for such a dangerous prank. The villagers warmly hugged each other, sincerely happy about their salvation, and then lined up in front of their savior. The children were delighted that he had saved their lives. Now each one clearly realized how great the danger had been, and they repentantly asked forgiveness for their previous rudeness and mistrust of him. The rest of the villagers also approached the young man and lowered their heads in embarrassment, admitting their mistake. They asked for forgiveness for having previously treated him with disdain, considering him a weak and useless stranger, unable to protect himself and others. Ainz told them that they did not have to apologize to him at all. According to him, even today he went into the forest to study magic, not to save anyone in particular. Therefore, he emphasized that thanks and apologies were unnecessary, since he himself chose this path. His sister called him a real fine fellow for the fact that with just one word he was able to make everyone feel sincerely guilty. However, the guy himself stood slightly dumbfounded, completely not understanding what was being discussed. The girl was amazed that she didn't know how caring he was. Her brother called it a lie. Silica asked him not to be embarrassed, because she had seen it all with her own eyes. Evan was glad that people had calmed down a bit and that no one would tease him anymore. The man confidently declared that the boy had now definitely become part of their family. The young wizard felt some unusual sensation inside, as if a warm wave had enveloped his chest. It was unfamiliar and pleasant, but he still did not understand what exactly it meant. The young man dreamed of immediately going into the forest, for he had found a wonderful hut full of ancient folios and rare manuscripts about magic, and he wanted to study all of this as soon as possible. Ainz stated that he wanted to make up for his past mistake to Sylv village by dedicating himself to helping the village in any way possible, even if it meant the smallest chance of success. These words left his sister shocked and amazed by his selfless decision. The villagers marveled at the young man's incredible passion for new knowledge. Many openly said that they did not expect any other behavior from him, knowing his deep interest in studying the unknown and his constant desire to learn new things. Silica smiled softly and quietly told her brother to move forward, because that was the essence of his character, although she and others would be a little sad and lonely without him. Her father supported the girl, claiming that his son had the right to follow his desires, and they would provide all the necessary explanations to Korea later. The man asked that if any problems arose, Ainz should not hesitate to come to them and drop in occasionally. The small children also expressed their desire to go along, but the adults reminded the children that they were strictly forbidden from going into the forest. The boy warmly thanked the villagers for their support and understanding, deeply touched by the warmth and kindness they showed him. While living in a quiet forest hut, the young man often became immersed in thought, mentally preparing for some important journey, constantly packing things and checking equipment, as if expecting great things to come. He was well aware of who he was. Ainz Sylvester, nicknamed the One-Eyed, One-Armed, and One-Legged, is the perfect master of the three elements, whose abilities are truly unique and worthy of respect. The guy thought he could be called an excellent wizard. Smiling, he suddenly realized that he had not left the secluded forest refuge for a long time, immersed in the study of ancient sciences and forgotten arts, forgetting about the rest of the world. There was a special atmosphere here, completely different from the usual reality. Ainz was quite surprised to find how much the village had changed over the years, becoming almost unrecognizable. Looking up, he noticed the figure of a girl, frozen in the shadow of the branches, near a familiar majestic tree. The young man asked what she was doing. The interlocutor raised an eyebrow slyly and asked if he really didn't notice that she was engrossed in reading a book about magic. The girl answered his question by mentioning a book about magic and added that it was just a copy. She found it strange that he didn't even know that and assumed that the guy was definitely not a local. Ainz asked her to wait since he was not a stranger here and suggested asking Silica or Evan about it. The girl sarcastically remarked that if he was so eager to be called a local, then the first thing he should do would be to find out which of the people he knew had long since left here. The guy was shocked and asked if Evan had become the village elder in the last few days. The girl corrected him, explaining that it was no longer a village, but a sacred place in the north of the Santia kingdom, where the seals were preserved, and she was an active knight guarding this land. The knight screamed angrily, accusing the young man of daring to commit an unacceptable act, to illegally invade the very heart of their holy place. Confused by what was happening, Ainz tried to explain to her that he did not fully understand the situation. In order to buy time and understand the situation, he activated the magic spell, Time Slowing. The lady immediately realized that he was a wizard and added that she had never seen such magic before. However, she warned that at such a distance his magic was useless against her sword. The young man replied that she would not succeed. He also pointedly emphasized that the knight's sword had long since left her hand, remaining far behind. The girl was shocked and did not understand when the young man managed to perform such a clever action. Ainz suggested discussing everything calmly. The interlocutor realized that she had allowed herself to relax and lost her usual alertness. The knight decided that it was nothing to worry about and that she could easily defeat her opponent with her bare hands. The young man realized that he had angered her and chose to surrender, deciding to simply leave, regretting that the village of Tas was no more. The girl asked him to stop, asking in surprise if he really knew about the once existing village of Tas. Ainz seriously assured that, of course, he remembered this village, because before he went to live in the forest, he lived right here, among simple and friendly people who considered him family. The knight thought for a moment, looking closely at the young man, as if remembering something important. Finally, something clicked in her mind, and she hesitantly asked his name. The young man said his name was Ainz Sylvester, and now it seems he can be called a wizard. The girl was struck by an idea, and some associations began to emerge in her head. The young man worriedly asked if everything was all right with her. She, blushing slightly, briefly said that she felt fine. The knight asked the gentleman to follow her. The guy refused, noting that the lady had just recently tried to kill him, and it was unclear why he should trust her again. The girl sincerely apologized and emphasized that the upcoming conversation was extremely important. She explained that her name was Sophia, and that she belonged to the Holy Order of the Silver Knights of Ainz City, asking him to follow her as he had to meet the commander. The boy refused, fearing that she would become enraged again and attack him. The knight asked him to stop, saying that what had happened was a simple misunderstanding, and assured him that she was not going to deceive him. However, the young man persisted in his refusal. Then she promised that he would be fed for free. Ainz was amazed at what existed in the city, and it was the first time he had seen something like this. The guy also asked Sophia, who was pulling him by the collar, to wait and let him look around the area because it was so interesting. The girl said that she would give him a tour later, but now they urgently needed to go to the commander. The young man was looking forward to this, anticipating the delicious breakfast that would certainly be prepared especially for him. The thought of a hearty meal warmed his soul. The young man was amazed at how huge the buildings and gates looked here, and the knight persistently asked him to follow her. Seeing the passers-by looking at him, the guy felt awkward. Sophia reassured him, saying that everything was fine, and they entered the commander's office. The man tensely turned to the girl and asked what had happened. And, noticing a guy standing nearby, he suddenly started calling someone, apparently wanting to quickly notify them about the unexpected guest. The man happily ordered Gauss to bring him the best red wine, exclaiming that it seemed that Sophia had finally found herself a groom. The girl quickly explained to the chief that what was happening should be perceived rather as a misunderstanding. The man advised her not to be so embarrassed because it seemed that love had been born in her heart. The knight objected, declaring that everything was completely different and she would never have brought her lover here. The leader admitted his mistake and wondered who this strange guest was. The subordinate explained that he would have to do something first. Sophia asked him to prepare a sumptuous breakfast for the guest, paying special attention to serving exquisite desserts and aromatic freshly brewed coffee, creating the impression of exceptional hospitality. Ainz stated that he really liked coffee. The knight was pleased to hear this confession, but the commander was frankly perplexed as to how to interpret such words. Seeing the generous treat on the table, the guest cordially wished himself bon appetit. And then he enjoyed every bite of the dish and appreciated the skill of the cooks. Sophia described the circumstances of the case in detail, telling about the meeting with the young man near the tree and his role in preserving the village. The commander listened carefully to her story, after which he made a decision. The girl honestly admitted that she had no concrete evidence of the truth of her words. The boss reassured her that the lack of material evidence was not a problem, and promised to personally conduct a thorough check of the veracity of the information received. The man slowly pushed aside the massive oak table, revealing a heavy metal hatch. Having confirmed his subordinate's assumption, the leader showed them a book called The Beginning. The Beginning is a book that describes the events of 2,000 years ago, telling the story of a magician named Ainz. This book emits powerful magical energy, so only a few are able to read it. The book served as the basis for the creation of the city of Ainz and the Holy Order of the Silver Knights. The man believed that keeping such an artifact on oneself was a sin. Then the leader strictly ordered Sophia to keep silent about everything she had seen and heard, and not to reveal the secret to strangers. The girl agreed to keep silent and protect the secrets entrusted to her. Ainz intently and carefully asked if he was familiar with the famous book. The guy replied no, and he was curious about what was there. Then he asked if he could read the book. The leader added that he could of course read it, and asked him to be careful, since it was difficult for an ordinary person to even hold a book in his hands, and then he handed it over. Suddenly, the young man realized something after reading the book, and the man was shocked that he was okay, because he could barely turn the page. It turned out that it was Ainz's ancient diary. The others, hearing this, froze in amazement, their eyes wide open. The guy continued that he wrote down everything that could help the villagers here, but he abandoned this idea and added that if you look closely, the inscription, "Beginning," was written by Silica, and this brought back memories for him. He pointed to the recording and said that it was here that his name was clearly written. The commander continued to stare at him with bewilderment, his gaze frozen in a silent question. He explained that it said, Ainz Sylvester. It turns out that the guest is the greatest wizard who formed the basis of their order, and asked if his name was really Ainz. The guy answered that it was, and added that it was written a little incorrectly. The young man continued that the correct answer would be Ainz Sylvester. His last name is a combination of the name of his home village, Sylve, and the village of Tas, where he was taken care of. And then he noticed her mistake in the spell, deciding to correct it. Suddenly, Sophia suddenly knelt down and shouted that she dedicated her body and sword to Lord Ainz and was ready to sacrifice her life for him. The knight asked him to take her oath, he asked him to stop doing this, and the commander was in shock. The young man asked to leave him alone while the girl thanked him. The leader understood that the guest had opened the book so easily and even wrote something there. As a result, the magic in the book became even stronger, and he could not even turn the page. The man had no doubts, this was the owner of the book. He also understood that this guy was definitely the legendary wizard, white-haired, Ainz, the one who was able to survive in the forest for 2,000 years. However, he was greatly troubled by the guest's statement that he had only spent a few years in the forest. The man cautiously inquired why the great wizard had decided to suddenly leave his secluded refuge among the trees, leaving behind the quiet life of a forest dweller. Ainz smiled calmly and explained that something completely normal had happened in the forest. He had simply stayed there longer than usual, immersed in studying magic. The boy responded to the leader's surprised question about being stuck by explaining that he had misinterpreted everything. He had simply gotten carried away reading books about magic. He then returned the book and thanked the delicious meal. The man modestly objected that gratitude was not required. The young man added that he had left the forest to travel a little and asked to be told where Evan and Silka were. The leader was at a loss, not knowing how to explain to the guest that Mr. Evan and Saint Silica had left their world 2,000 years ago, and he was painfully wondering what he should do next. The commander decided to change the subject and asked that if he needed anything, they would prepare everything for him. Ainz smiled warmly and expressed his gratitude, noting that it was indeed time for him to move on, but there was a glimmer of interest in his gaze. He wanted to know where to direct his next steps. Sophia remarked that why not go to the kingdom of Kirk, since there is a great academy for the study of magic there. The gentleman did not understand what kingdom he was talking about. The girl explained that the most skilled wizards gather there to improve their magical skills. The guy called the Magic Academy an amazing place and understood that he should have gone there from the very beginning. The knight did not think that he would be able to learn anything there. The leader approached the young wizard, asking permission to prepare everything for the upcoming trip. The man introduced the girl, whose name was Sophia, as a guide, assuring that she would show him everything. The girl, beaming with happiness and pride, confirmed that she was ready to serve her new hero. The commander added that it was thanks to this book that they had achieved such success, that their wealth and the wizard's too, and he was sure that the knight would be useful to him. Ainz came to a conclusion and thanked for the help. Sophia's eyes sparkled with anticipation of the journey. She literally tore herself away, repeating over and over that she could not wait any longer. The wizard realized that magic had been developing all this time and had made great strides forward, as had culture. He found it incredibly interesting. The boys set off resolutely, walking towards the unknown across endless expanses. Ainz turned to Sophia, remembering her stories about the Kingdom of Kirk, which was striking in its uniqueness and versatility. His phrase was filled with genuine curiosity and a desire to learn more. The girl answered affirmatively that this is why they are called Silver Knights. Her voice sounded proud of belonging to such a glorious order. She explained that the Silver Knights were a group that wielded magic. They were highly valued when hunting monsters or resolving conflicts with other countries, all thanks to the white-haired Ainz-sama. The guy doubted what he had heard and carefully asked the girl again about the gentleman's name. The young hero looked at his interlocutor intently, curiosity flashing in his eyes. In a voice full of doubt and interest, he asked who this famous character of history was, whose name sounded so unfamiliar and significant. The girl visibly tensed up, feeling the unexpectedness of the situation. Her lips parted slightly and her eyebrows rose, demonstrating complete amazement. She stood motionless for a few seconds, trying to digest the question asked. Sophia remembered that he was the greatest wizard who was also called a god among magicians. Ainz called him an amazing person. The girl thought why he did not understand that they were talking about him. The commander asked her to keep it a secret. The gentleman expressed a desire to meet him and was sure that he would teach him new magic. The knight explained that she did not think that was possible, because it was he himself. The guy assumed that she wanted to say that he was not worthy of meeting him, and that she really had problems again, and now she didn't like him again. The knight realized that she needed to change the subject and turned to him, saying that she had wanted to ask something for a long time, and Ainz did not understand why he could not meet with the great wizard. Sophia looked at her companion with genuine curiosity and asked the question that was tormenting her consciousness. If he was a real wizard, why did he need a sword at all? After all, apparently, the art of fencing was not one of his talents. And the girl continued to think out loud, wondering if the owner of the most powerful magic carries a weapon, does that mean that the sword also has special properties? Her mind inquisitively searched for answers, fantasizing about possible secrets and mysterious artifacts associated with the blade. The companion laughed good-naturedly, throwing his head back, and replied that, why not? There was a slight irony in his voice, mixed with pleasure from the amusing game of questions and guesses. A bright smile lit up his face, giving the image a special warmth and attractiveness. He paused for a moment, collecting his thoughts, and then continued with particular inspiration that the movements of the sword were like real magic, for they were closely interconnected. Sophia timidly suggested that the sword's movements led to magic. The young man agreed with the statement, but then playfully added that she saw a very ordinary sword, not enchanted at all. Suddenly the silence was broken by a terrible, low roar that rolled through the forest. The sound was so powerful and threatening that the hair on the back of the neck immediately stood on end. The travelers' hearts pounded wildly, the blood pulsated in their veins, transmitting an alarm signal to every organ of the body. The knight noted that it was an armored grizzly, and a huge one at that, and asked the gentleman to stay behind, promising to distract the beast herself and let him attack with magic. The guy calmed her down, asking her not to worry. The young man confidently declared that he would be a worthy opponent for the fearsome monster as it spread its terrifying roars along the edge of the forest. His voice was firm and decisive, his eyes sparkled with the excitement of battle. Sophia screamed desperately that it was impossible to defeat the enemy with such a cheap weapon. Fear was evident in her voice, reflected in the anxiety in her eyes. The huge armored grizzly charged, the ground shaking under the weight of its footsteps. The young hero remained completely unperturbed, stoically enduring the pressure of the approaching threat. The guy suddenly spoke in a soft voice, as if carried away by a philosophical conversation. His gaze was directed towards his companion, his eyes twinkling with a sly grin. Curiosity prompted him to ask a strange question: what, in her opinion, he relates exclusively to food. With a barely noticeable movement of his fingers, the young man activated a powerful spell. The bear rose into the air like a feather torn off by a gust of wind. The animal's gigantic carcass floated smoothly above the trees. The powerful muscles tensed one last time, then relaxed, giving in to the force of the spell. Sophia stood motionless, her eyes wide open, as if she had seen a real miracle. What she saw went beyond the usual perception of reality. A mixture of admiration and fear made her tremble with a small shudder, realizing the scale of what had happened. Ainz realized that she was using magic to strengthen her body and sword. He used a similar spell and shot out energy from the tip of his prosthetic. He continued that of course this was not real full-fledged magic or sorcery, but just simple manipulation of mana. The young man's surprise knew no bounds when he discovered that the monster had somehow survived his attack. The ensuing pause allowed for reflection. Sophia was the first to break the silence, suggesting that the wounded monster had become even more angry and aggressive, but her interlocutor merely noted wryly that sometimes nothing can be done. Maddened by pain and rage, the armored grizzly let out a terrifying roar that tore through the silence of the forest. The predator's enormous figure instantly turned into a solid mass of muscles and claws, aimed at destroying any obstacle. Deciding to combine martial arts with magic, Ainz chose a tactic based on the principles of fencing. Moving gracefully, he activated a special spell, Shadow Actor. With one quick and precise blow of the blades, the bear's head was separated from its body. The impact shook the earth, spreading a rumble throughout the area. The steel shine of the swords dimmed. The monster fell to the ground like a huge statue that had lost its support. Sophia watched the battle scene with wide eyes, complete shock and admiration written all over her face. She had never seen such a level of skill and technique in wielding weapons before. Ainz explained that in order to use a spell like this, one must at least have basic swordsmanship, otherwise the spell will not work. One of the blades suddenly crunched and broke exactly in half right in the guy's hand. The reaction was immediate. The young man froze, his eyes widened in surprise. He assumed that the weapon could not withstand the load, and that a replacement should be found quickly. Sophia was surprised to see how he simply threw away the broken sword, considering that such behavior was not at all typical of a real swordsman. Ainz added that he demonstrated a spell that combined magic and swordsmanship to her anyway and asked her opinion. The girl thanked him warmly for showing him such a wonderful spell. The guy asked her to calm down, and the girl asked if he was okay. Suddenly, another girl rushed to help, explaining that she had heard the roar of an armored grizzly, but apparently arrived too late. At the sight of the enormous body of the monster lying on the ground, she froze, as if she had turned into a stone statue. The shock of what she saw gradually gave way to deep relief. Ainz realized that Sophia's reaction had confused him and he had not noticed the arrival of the savior. He replied that they had defeated the monster, but his sword had broken. A charming girl sat nearby, examining the huge carcass of a bear covered with a thick layer of fur and skin. Her eyes reflected sincere admiration for the strength and thickness of the beast's cover. She exclaimed in delight, assuming that a sword that could pierce the armor of an armored grizzly bear was certainly of high quality and craftsmanship. Ainz smiled and admitted that it was the cheapest sword, more suitable for children to train with than experienced fighters. This admission astounded the girls. One opened her mouth, trying in vain to express her surprise in words, the other just gasped, not understanding if it was true. The rescuer asked if they had defeated the grizzly with the toy sword and expressed concern that something had happened to the boy, noticing that his arm and leg looked strange. Ainz asked her to wait and stated that he did not look suspicious at all, and asked his companion if it was true. Sophia said that she did not even know. The young man emphasized that now was not the time for sarcasm. The savior decided to come to terms with the situation, internally recognizing that such a charming and open guy could not possibly be a dangerous criminal. Moreover, as she said this, she added that it was time for her to go about her business. Her voice was soft but firm, making it clear that her visit had a purpose and now it was time to move on. Ainz called it a good decision and turned to Sophia, saying that it was time for them to go as well. The girl asked her master what to do with the grizzly. The knight suggested that the killed bear could be used to obtain materials for excellent armor, and it would be a shame to just leave the spoils. The young man agreed with her. Having made his decision, he confidently approached the huge grizzly carcass, feeling the satisfaction of knowing that his mission had been accomplished. A generous smile lit up his face, his eyes lit up with an inner fire of success. Without hesitation, he waved his hand, summoning a magical portal that would allow him to move his prey. The huge carcass of the bear suddenly dissolved into space, sucked into the young man's hand. The unimaginable scene made his companion freeze in place, her eyes wide open. The rescuer didn't understand where he disappeared to. Ainz added that he had placed him in his spatial storage. The girl screamed, amazed that he had his own space, and exclaimed that he was really that rich. The gentleman replied that he was creating it himself and was a real poor man. She was shocked that he was creating this space himself. The girl suddenly realized that this was a real wizard. Ainz calmly confirmed her guess, smiling slightly at the corners of his lips. Suddenly, the rescuer's face flushed scarlet, like the flame of a candle lit by a sudden realization. Her cheeks glowed with heat, betraying her inner excitement and confusion. She couldn't believe she had met a wizard in such a place. The guy had a bad feeling and asked her to help him quickly. The girl introduced herself, saying that her name was Reika Brandy and that she was a member of the Duke Brandy family. In fact, she was currently searching for a gang of bandits. Sophia asked how knights could lose to bandits, since they could easily defeat them. Reika noted that there was a very strong opponent among the enemies, so she went to look for help. The young man added that, in fact, they were in a great hurry to get to the kingdom of Kirk. The knight asked who this bandit was, and was told that he was a sorcerer. The guy thought about it and suddenly became very interested. Reika explained that she also had some magic skills, but the enemy was using spells that she had never encountered before. The young man suddenly froze, as if he heard the call of a distant inner voice. Thoughts flashed through his head, changing his mood from light carelessness to heavy thoughtfulness. The former friendly smile disappeared without a trace, replaced by a stern look, full of concern and hidden anxiety. He turned to Sophia, and the girl, catching his gaze, instantly understood his intentions and said that she would follow him anywhere. Reika was glad that this meant that they would help her in the battle with the bandits. The young man proudly stated his name, Ainz, and insistently asked to be shown where the treacherous sorcerer was hiding. His voice was filled with iron determination, reflecting his inner readiness for battle. They set off on their journey, and Reika realized that her companion was Sophia, one of the famous Silver Knights. The girl confirmed this, and the other thought that she was incredibly lucky to have met them. Ainz asked if she was really that famous, and received confirmation of the statement. Reika explained that she was a knight guarding the sacred lands of the great wizard Ainz, and added that she was simply an incredible person with a wonderful character. Sophia realized that she could no longer hold back and wanted to tell everyone that Ainz was that great wizard. Suddenly, the assistant froze in alarm, as if she had caught a faint, barely audible sound. The group automatically stopped, listening to their surroundings. The whisper of the forest gradually died down, giving way to another, more disturbing sound. The boys listened more attentively, and soon their faces became more serious, and their eyes narrowed in intense attention. It was clear that the source of the noise was already very close. The boy looked at Reika with interest and, trying to remain calm, asked what kind of magic the sorcerer used. There was curiosity in his voice, bordering on anxiety, because information about the enemy was key to developing an attack strategy. The girl replied that she mostly saw magic balls of various elements, but the main problem was an unusual spell that made her lose her voice and turned off her vision. She continued that if they were to be affected by this spell, their movements would be paralyzed and they would be unable to fight, move, or use magic. This was truly terrifying. Sophia's heart sank at the terrifying prospect of being left completely motionless and vulnerable. Cold sweat broke out on her forehead, her palms became sweaty, and her breath caught in her throat. In her mind's eye, she imagined herself as a frozen statue, powerless and helpless in the face of mortal danger. Ainz frowned, realizing the gravity of the situation. It was his first time encountering such a magical technique, and he felt unsure and anxious. Losing control over his body and speech could lead to disastrous consequences in battle. Reika asked if he had any healing magic. The guy replied that he hadn't mastered it completely but had learned a few things. The interlocutor was happy with this news. The girl reported with alarm that the stock of healing potions was almost exhausted, and injuries were appearing more and more often. Looking at her companions, she experienced a real shock. Ainz was full of seriousness before the upcoming battle with the unknown. Sophia had the same serious, terrifying face. The team turned to see a boy calling for someone to come to his aid. His voice trembled with fear and despair as he screamed loudly, begging to save his little sister. Tears rolled down the child's cheeks, drawing a path of pure hope for the salvation of a loved one. The team was faced with a sad picture. A little girl completely covered in deep, bleeding wounds. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her skin was pale and burned in places. Reika noticed that the wound was too deep and didn't know if a healing potion would help in such a situation. She suggested that healing magic might help, but she needed to save her strength for the battle with the sorcerer. His brother asked him to teach him healing magic, but Ainz replied that it would be impossible since the boy had no magical abilities. However, he added that this does not mean that he will turn his back on him. The magician made an important decision, to pass on to the boy all the necessary knowledge accumulated over years of persistent research and practice. The young man thanked him heartily, and Ainz ordered the team to move forward and handed them healing potions he had specially created, adding that he would catch up with them soon. Besides, he counted on Sophia. The girl was happy with such trust and participation in the common cause. The knight shouted that she would not let her master down and ordered Reika to move forward, but she asked to wait to figure out what was happening. Ainz suggested that they begin training. The boy asked to confirm whether the interlocutor was a wizard. He replied that formally he was not, but he also knew a little magic, sometimes he did it for fun. The boy asked to explain to him the difference between magic and witchcraft. Ainz explained that magic is the act of changing the laws of nature using magical energy, and that is the essence of magic. It is important to have a large amount of mana. The more mana you have when you are born, the more powerful a wizard you can become. The boy had almost none. However, he continued his explanation, claiming that witchcraft is an interference with the laws of the universe using external, unnatural forces that do not belong to their world. The teacher noted that achieving such results requires an extremely strong will. The master warned that practicing witchcraft comes with a high price. The boy asked if this was an exchange. Ainz replied that it was a correct assumption and he should pay him. The magician continued that if he did not have magical potential, and his sister's life was hanging by a thread, then he wanted something in return for his help, and asked what his name was. The boy replied that it was Rit. The teacher smiled tenderly when he heard the boy's name and called it beautiful and sonorous. He himself called himself Ainz Sylvester and said that he would give him his knowledge of magic. Then he activated the right-hand miracle spell. Rit looked at what was happening with surprise and some admiration. Sophia smelled the blood. It was distinct and unpleasant, causing discomfort and anxiety. She said that she would deal with the sorcerer, and Mrs. Reika would take care of the wounded. The girl agreed. Holding the bag of healing potion, she understood that there was very little of it and it would not be enough even for first aid. And then Reika suddenly decided that she should not doubt, and followed her companion. A wide clearing filled with many human figures opened up before the girls. Sophia asked if this was the magic. She came to this conclusion because people looked as if they were immobilized and did not understand where they were. The air they had to breathe was heavy and suffocating, as if a poisonous cloud of death hung over their heads. Sophia said that her companion had not exaggerated when she spoke about the spell, and the girl asked her to go there. Rika confidently pointed her finger at the tall man in the black cloak standing in the center of the battle and declared that he was the sorcerer. The knight decided to deal with him quickly. The group of thugs suddenly froze, noticing a familiar silhouette appearing in the battle, and they recognized her as the same daring girl who had once tried to fight them. They declared that this time she would definitely not run away, and one of them decided to have fun with her first. Indignation was reflected on the girl's face. Her mouth was tightly compressed, her jaws were tense. In response to the mockery and threats, she poured out a stream of indignation, accusing men of base actions and moral decline. The knight instantly decapitated 2 bandits, ending their villainous lives with one swift movement of his blade. Rika said that her companion was amazing, a master of the art of fencing. Her blows were graceful and deadly, her movements were full of power and precision. The girl asked her friend to take care of the wounded, emphasizing the urgency of the aid, the suffering of the victims, and the need to act immediately. Rika agreed, resolutely heading towards where the groans of the unfortunate were heard. She thoughtfully noted the ease of defeating the bandits and was surprised by the lack of participation of the powerful sorcerer, wondering why he did not come to the aid of his comrades. The sorcerer was surprised to notice the knight's unusual appearance and said that his name was Corberry. The man added that he simply hates swordsmen. He then activated the Fire Spears spell. The magical spears instantly rushed forward, rapidly approaching the girl, ready to pierce her body with blinding flashes of flame. Sophia parried the attack with lightning speed, throwing the magical spears away. A victorious smile immediately appeared on the knight's face, his eyes sparkling with confidence and pride in his mastery of the sword. Corberry suddenly realized that he was dealing with real anti-magic, feeling an unexpected chill inside himself. Sophia sarcastically asked if this attack was the limit of the sorcerer's capabilities. The knight asked the enemy to attack her, and Rika brought potions to the wounded and asked them to be patient a little longer. People thanked her, but the girl was surprised by something. She was filled with genuine admiration as she looked at the huge amount of healing potions that the magnanimous Ainz had given her. Never before had the girl seen so many healing elixirs at once, and she felt deep respect and gratitude towards her benefactor. Rika wondered if the bag had extra space built in and considered it a real treasure. The girl also wondered who this mysterious young man was. The warriors asked what kind of potion it was. They continued to share their impressions, assuring those around them that the wounds had disappeared without a trace, leaving the warriors completely healthy. Their faces expressed genuine amazement, as if they had witnessed a real miracle. Rika suddenly realized that these were unusual potions, assuming that they were of the highest quality, and could not believe it, since Ainz said that he had prepared them himself. She then ordered the boys to go into battle. Corberry concentrated, activating the most powerful silent magic. The air around him crackled with energy, preparing to deliver a crushing blow from an invisible force. The magical tension grew, creating a sense of inevitability of the coming catastrophe. Activating the spell Fire Spears, he sent an avalanche of glittering arrows towards Sophia, rushing towards her with deadly speed. Each arrow carried the destructive power of fire, threatening to turn the brave girl into ashes. She said that nothing would come of it, because even if the number of copies were increased, the result would not change, and added that it was useless. The sorcerer laughed sardonically at the bold statement, his lips twisting into a sardonic grin. His laughter sounded dark and contemptuous, as if the girl's confidence seemed to him a ridiculous illusion that would soon be dispelled by the inexorable laws of magic. The man addressed her with mocking irony, calling her a young, impudent person. Sophia denied this statement and added that she is a member of the Order of the Silver Knights. Corberry said that he did not expect to meet a real knight here, called her an immortal witch, and emphasized that she had slipped him a fake, and he, naive, believed it. The knight asked if the enemy was a member of the Eternal Sky Cult. The man confirmed her guess and asked to look at their magic, noting that they themselves had inherited it from the white-haired man, Ainz. And then the sorcerer activated the spell. The alchemist turns sand into gold. All white will be replaced by black. Darkness will swallow all light. Sophia realized that this was an unfamiliar spell to her and decided that she needed to stop him from completing what he had started. The man's next action was to cast a powerful spell, No Movement. The girl's legs instantly gave way, her knees began to shake as if they had become like cotton wool, and her heart began to beat faster, experiencing sudden fear and weakness. Sophia stood there, eyes wide and frozen in shock, her face pale, her breathing quickening, her mind racing to understand what was happening. She strained with all her might, trying to keep her balance and not fall, fighting the sudden panic that had arisen. Corberry calmly cast the spell, no climbing, causing a thick energy barrier to appear, pinning the bodies firmly to the ground. Sophia was completely confused, not understanding what exactly had happened. Her body felt like stone, refusing to obey her brain's commands. An unknown force held every muscle, preventing her from moving, causing a feeling of helplessness and anxiety. The sorcerer activated the spell, fighting with a sword is forbidden, and added that this was the end. And then came the terrifying spell, Fire Spears. Dozens of red-hot projectiles instantly rushed forward, piercing the girl's fragile figure with hundreds of painful blows. The man demanded that the knight remember his place, emphasize the boundaries of his power, and humbly acknowledge his superiority. Suddenly a battlecry was heard, and as if sent by fate, Rika appeared nearby along with a squad of loyal warriors. Corberry stared in amazement at the surviving soldiers, amazed that even after the most terrible wounds the army had retained its fighting ability. Rika asked her assistant to drink the healing potion quickly, as she needed to restore her strength, otherwise the next attack would be fatal. Sophia convulsively grabbed the offered vessel, hastily unscrewing the lid and greedily swallowing the thick liquid, barely noticing the taste. The magic potion began to spread throughout the body instantly, returning lost strength and healing deep wounds. She was amazed by the miracle of healing, watching as the deep wounds on her body instantly healed, leaving only a slight trace. The skin became smooth again, the blood stopped oozing, and the painful tingling gradually gave way to a pleasant warmth. Rika announced that the end of Corberry had come, his dark deeds and crimes would end today, he would no longer be able to harm anyone. The sorcerer stood there, confused, looking at his enemies whose wounds had miraculously healed. Disbelief was evident on his face as he wondered where so many healing potions could have come from, and why no one had died despite the numerous attacks. Rika ordered the wizards to attack the enemy with magical attacks and support the knights with defensive spells, and then surround the enemy, cutting off their escape routes. Corberry considered the hero's efforts to be pathetic attempts to gain the upper hand. He activated the spell, All Around Our Enemies. The warriors stood motionless, gripped by a chilling horror, watching the unfolding catastrophe. They tried to hold on to their sanity, desperately calling on each other to stop, ignoring the magical compulsion and preserving the remnants of human consciousness, and urging each other to remember that they were allies, standing shoulder to shoulder for a common goal and obliged to overcome the curse. All creatures within the spell's range automatically turned into bloodthirsty monsters, ready to destroy each other. The world plunged into chaos and madness. Sophia called the enemy a heartless scoundrel who uses low witchcraft, sowing hatred among friends and destroying trust. Corberry carefully surveyed the enemy positions, gradually realizing that their stocks of healing potions were almost exhausted. This discovery made him uneasy, because each sip of healing liquid restored his wasted strength and allowed him to re-enter the battle. He activated the spell, Fire Spears. Ainz announced that he would transfer the knowledge into the boy's mind right now, opening access to all the necessary information. The wizard warned that the process of transferring knowledge does not bring pleasant sensations, accompanied by unpleasant sensations. Then he gently asked Rit to be patient. The boy's gaze expressed the utmost concentration and tension, but he courageously overcame the discomfort caused by preparing for the most difficult process of knowledge transfer. For the sake of his sister, he decided to heroically endure the test. Ainz decided to begin the ritual, taking a deep breath and focusing on the main thing. His calm, measured tone indicated his inner confidence and readiness to perform an important deed. The boy was experiencing unbearable pain, distorted by a grimace of suffering. Every cell of his body ached from the excruciating pressure. However, he continued to stoically endure the trials, clenching his fists and gritting his teeth, overcoming internal doubts and fears. Ainz reported that everything was ready and asked if Rit knew what to do next. Slowly, as if overcoming invisible resistance, he opened his eyes. His gaze became clear and deep, reflecting the acquired wisdom and inner harmony. The young mage concentrated, quietly reciting the formula of the ancient spell, Evil for Good. Energy began to concentrate around him, forming a silvery aura that surrounded his body with shimmering threads of light. Ainz looked at what had happened with undisguised amazement, shocked by the result achieved. Meanwhile, Rit, moving carefully and respectfully, approached his unconscious sister, gently trying to touch her hair. Carefully, as if afraid to disturb his sister's peace, he reached out and gently ran his finger over the soft skin of her cheek. The deep wounds that covered her body began to heal surprisingly quickly, as if the magic of the new teaching was being absorbed by every cell of the body. In just a few seconds, fresh pink skin covered the damaged areas. Rith happily reported that he had succeeded and that now everything would be fine. Ainz realized that his disciple had absorbed the surrounding mana to cast the spell and called it an original approach while thanking him. The boy seemed to have no idea what the wizard was talking about and was confused and doubtful about his own abilities. Suddenly, the atmosphere around changed, filling with a vague, disturbing hum. Red stood with his eyes wide open, his skin feeling the complete stillness of the surrounding world. Movements stopped, sounds disappeared, the wind froze. Realizing that time literally stopped, the guy experienced a real shock, afraid of the unknown. A mysterious voice accused him of violating the laws of the universe. He explained that from now on, Rit's fate was sealed and he was forbidden to harm other beings. The boy was horrified, and Ainz asked if he had seen a vision. The boy answered affirmatively, explaining that he had received a warning against harming others. The wizard urged him to remember how important the wizard's oath was, emphasizing the responsibility and significance of the commitments made. Therefore, the magician asked the student to remain silent and not tell anyone about what had happened. The girls were furious, feeling how the magic held them tightly, not allowing them to take a single step. Their legs seemed to be rooted to the ground, their arms were immobile, any attempt to free themselves ended in failure. Corbury became too bored and decided to stop playing. Sophia realized that the enemy often uses magic thanks to the magic stones. She, realizing that the sorcerer's magical power was nearing its end, cautiously asked about his stock of stones. Rika optimistically suggested that victory was already almost achieved, inspiring the team to believe in their imminent success. Corbury called the warriors fools if they thought they could win. However, he knew that, despite the temporary advantage, the outcome of the duel was predetermined. The enemies would inevitably fall under the onslaught of his power. Corbury decided to tell them something interesting. The girls looked at the page, wide-eyed, in complete confusion and bewilderment. Sophia understood where this page had been torn from. Corbury clarified that it was only one page, but it had been torn out of the original book, and he had tried his best to get it. Sophia realized that things were bad for them. The sorcerer said that it was now their turn to die, and strengthened his magic. He then activated multiple fire spears. Ainz apologized for being late. The girls were happy to see their master. Corbury asked who he was and whether he wanted to die too. He replied that his name was Ainz and that he should not be threatened. The magician considered this extremely rude. With an irritated gesture, the wizard spread his hand to the sides, removing the previously installed magical seals. The spells dissolved in the air, freeing the captured warriors. They slowly came to their senses, remastering their freedom of movement. Corbury stood with his chin down and his eyes wide open, completely paralyzed with horror and disbelief. The blood pounded in his ears, his brain refused to accept the reality of what was happening. Sophia, smiling widely, looked at Ainz with admiration and delight, considering him the embodiment of the ideal hero. Meanwhile, Rika sat to the side, shocked by the events that had happened, realizing how far the limits of the possible stretched. Corbury was shocked that his opponent blocked his magic and did not understand how it happened. He asked if he was a wizard and how he was able to neutralize his spells. Ainz replied that he was not a wizard but a sorcerer. The man realized that his opponent had the same nature and capabilities as himself. The guy remembered that Rika had said that he was also a sorcerer, and he was glad to finally meet an equal master of magic. Corbury froze at his opponent's confession, his eyes widening in surprise and disbelief, his heart racing, and his face covered in sweat. Ainz asked if his enemy would show his true strength. Corbury called his opponent a real psycho and asked him to leave him alone. The young man explained that he simply wanted to see his magic. The man did not understand why he should demonstrate his abilities, because he considered the girl a person with muscles instead of brains, who would not understand anything anyway. Ainz smiled and said that he shouldn't speak so rudely about Sophia. She added that the man called all the people of Ainz's kingdom hillbillies. The young man added that he said he had decided to live in the forest in order to study magic. Corbury, grinning anxiously with anger, pronounced the activation of the spell. He activated the spell, the alchemist turns sand into gold. All white is replaced by black. Darkness absorbs all light. And he added that the enemy was now under his control. Ainz asked if he really thought it was a spell. Then Corbury activated the spell, "No approaching me is allowed." Suddenly the wizard froze, as if he had encountered an invisible barrier. The eyes widened in surprise. A feeling of internal resistance spread throughout the body. The sorcerer claimed that no matter who his opponent was, his magic was invincible, and now the young man would not be able to come even a step closer to him. Ainz noted that turning sand into gold signifies a change in the law. White symbolizes reaction, as can be seen from the line. White turns to black, and the light represents people. The magician considered this to be very interesting magic, real witchcraft. Corbury froze, shocked by the statement he had heard, his face expressing a mixture of disbelief and astonishment. Sophia also looked shocked. Her eyes widened, her breathing quickened. Reika sat, unable to hide her admiration and envy. Corbury asked in amazement whether his opponent had really called his magic witchcraft. Ainz confirmed that this was true, as it was not magic. The man asked if he really thought he was a magician, and added that, of course, he knew magic, but he didn't know any high-level spells. Ainz became upset and expressed disappointment that the enemy did not know high-level spells. And then I came to the conclusion that he was just a fake. He apologized to Reika and told Sophia that they were leaving. The knight assumed that the master realized that he was now unbeatable and therefore chose to retreat. Ainz said that he had expected to meet an outstanding sorcerer, but then was greatly disappointed when he discovered that he had no real talent. He noted that the enemy was just a magician and was no longer of interest to him. Corbury stood wide-eyed, speechless with shock. The man hysterically shouted that if he underestimated his strength, he would soon be dead, after which he quickly began to activate a new spell, hoping to show his true power. He activated multiple fire spears. But Ainz instantly used a magic block. The air was filled with a crystal-ringing sound as multiple fire arrows suddenly stopped, hovering in space. Corbury screamed, staring at the frozen arrows, not understanding what had happened or what it meant. Panic began to take over his mind. His thoughts were scattered in different directions. His search for an explanation only led to more confusion. Ainz replied that it was a simple spell and added that he also knew a few tricks, offering to demonstrate them. He activated the spell. The alchemist turns sand into gold. All white turns to black. Darkness will swallow all light. Then he added a second one. The use of magical objects is prohibited, and he decided to start small. The third was, using magic is prohibited. Corbury was shocked and tried to cast the multiple fire arrows spell 3 times, but he couldn't believe that it wasn't working. Ainz began to explain that the opponent had abandoned the development of his skills, relying solely on a single spell, which was quite sad. At the very least, he should have developed the magic of prohibition spells further. And for clarity, he activated the spell, "You are forbidden to breathe on him." Corbury was terrified. He instantly began to choke. While Corbury was suffering from pain, the warriors watched in amazement, not believing their own eyes. Ainz activated the spell, "You are allowed to breathe," and the enemy instantly began coughing and spitting, restoring his breathing. Someone angrily turns to his people and shouts for them to kill him. She will raise the reward by as much as 10 times. People are surprised by this, being perplexed. People agree, shouting that they need to go forward and kill this guy. Several of them rush at one guy at the same time. However, this man says that the enemies should allow him to show them one very interesting spell. He says this with a smile. The guy uses the removal of limitations, the divine hand. He raises his glowing hand up. His enemies look in shock as he first moves his hand and then clenches his hand into a fist. After this, he manages to defeat his opponents even from a distance. He wounds them and blood flows from them. They all fall to the ground. The guy stands right in front of the defeated enemies and looks at them. Everyone looks at this situation in shock. One of his enemies asks in horror what kind of magic it was, and who this guy even is. The guy calmly talks about the basics of the basics, changing the laws of nature and concentrating his desires, capable of destroying the rules of this world, the art of interfering in the universe. He calmly stands still. He then smiles, points his hand forward, and tells the enemies that this is the amount and excellent magic. The enemy on the ground crawls back in horror and begs the guy to stop and not come near him. Ainz with a serious face that there is no need to kill him because he is actually a member of a very dangerous cult, so they should interrogate him first. The guy looks back with displeasure and says that it is a pity, but this is a magical duel. So only one of them can remain alive. He grabs the very frightened enemy by the hair. He shudders with fear. The girls silently watch what is happening. Suddenly, someone asks Ainz Sama to wait again. Ainz turns around and sees a surprised girl. Next to her, there is another one, with her hand on her chest, who asks Ainz about why they don't take him to the capital as a prisoner. Since Mrs. Rika is from a very influential family, she can help them get into the academy. She asks Rika if this is true. She looks at her and the girl agrees with a smile, saying that with the help of her family it would be easy to do. After that, they manage to convince Ainz and he calmly agrees with them. He stands before his terrified enemy and tells him that so be it, he is leaving this guy to Rika. The guy with a calm expression on his face tells the guy that he is strictly forbidden to ask any questions. Let him lie down on the ground, and after that he will also be forbidden to get up. Then 2 carts come along the road. Someone reports that he thought they would have to continue their journey on foot. Everyone in the carriage thanks Rika, and she says with a smile that there will be no problem at all, and when they arrive at the mansion, they will be able to enjoy a wonderful dinner. Ainz says that this is very good, because neither she nor Sophia can cook. She asks Mr. Ainz why he told her this. Ainz sits nearby and thinks that this is great. Ainz asks the girl when she could have learned this, because she still doesn't even have a boyfriend. The girl falls into a stupor. Rika, on the contrary, understands all this and says that it's amazing. The girl asks her not to pay attention because in fact she can cook. Rika asks if she is telling the truth. She says that she devotes all her time to training with a sword, so she has no time for cooking. Rika smirks and says that she doesn't understand why she can't cook, and she asks her if she's making fun of her. The girl angrily reports that a kitchen knife is no different from a blade. She has mastered the sword, which means she can definitely handle some kind of knife. Ainz asks Sophia not to be angry because no kitchen can survive her strength. Sophia does not understand why Mr. Ainz is so strict with her. Rika turns to the guy and tells him that he is, without a doubt, a great wizard. One look was enough to be convinced of this. The guy listens to this calmly and thanks for the praise. Rika asks the guy to tell what Corberry used. Was it really magic? Is magic even capable of such a thing? Ainz smiles and tells the girl that she is right, because in fact it was not magic. Witchcraft is capable of changing the laws of nature. The girl understands this and says that she studied magic, so she had not heard of witchcraft. The guy looks at Rika in bewilderment and asks if she is not a knight. The girl admits with a smile that although she carries a sword, she is a novice sorceress, and she is going to take the exam soon. Ainz wonders if that's why they're heading to the Magic Academy, and she tells him that she's the Marquis's daughter, so getting in won't be difficult. The main character says that this is what was expected of aristocrats, not to mention that it would be impossible for them. The girl says that she doesn't like to brag about her status, so let him stop. Suddenly, the main character accidentally bumps into the girl with his shoulder and gasps, after which she remembers something and turns to him. He remains silent. The girl asks Ainz what happened to that boy and his sister. She remembers those too. The main character, closing his eyes, calmly asks the girl not to worry because they are definitely fine, and she sighs with relief. She asks the protagonist if he taught him healing magic. He denies it and says that he has no ability for magic, so he taught him witchcraft. Everyone is surprised by this. He reports that this evil is for good. He stole someone else's magical power to use healing. Rit actually surprised him a lot. Now he is looking forward to their next meeting. The girl is surprised at how such a young boy managed to master witchcraft. Even though the man with incredible magical powers is sitting right in front of her eyes, the coachman tells them that they will soon arrive in Kirk, and everyone is surprised by this. They drive up to the gate and the coachman asks them if they have an ID. The girl agrees with a smile, but Ainz admits that he doesn't have one. The girl asks him not to worry, because he can simply say that he lost it in battle, especially since this is the crew of the Brandy family. No one will dare to search it at all. The gates open and 2 guards stand by the carriage, after which they tell the coachman that everything is fine and they can drive through. He thanks them for this. Ainz with a smile that, as she said, they had no problems. The guy thinks that nobles are capable of anything. Suddenly they notice something. The carriage drives straight into the city, where there are streets with tall buildings. The city is filled with people. Everyone is discussing something with each other. Someone is looking at the person who is standing in the center of attention and demonstrating something. The main character gets out of the carriage and looks at all this with great surprise, while the girl with a calm face reports that they have arrived at their destination. They are welcomed to the vast kingdom of Kirk, in the center of which is a castle. Someone at a huge beautiful mansion meets people getting out of a carriage and calls the girl Madam. The girl tells Rist that she is finally home and the people behind her are her guests. She orders dinner to be prepared for them, and the servants agree to this. The protagonist looks around and is surprised, asking the girl if this is her family's estate. So huge, she agrees and says that this is one of the estates of the Brandy family. Such are the nobles of this kingdom. Instead of using finances to help people, they build absurdly huge estates. The girl informs them that if it were not for their help, they would have been arrested for insulting an aristocrat. There are several dishes on the table, as well as cutlery. The main character is drooling and he is surprised at how delicious everything looks. There is a glass of wine in front of him. They ask the girl if they can really eat it all. There is so much here, they want to try everything. The girl says that the head of the house, Brandy, is not there yet. Let them wait a little. Suddenly, some sound is heard. An adult man with a mustache bursts into the room and asks Rika if she is injured. Rika calmly greets her father and tells him that she is completely fine. The man is very happy about this. The man reports that when he received the message that they were under attack by the enemy, he was beside himself. He hugs his daughter and cries. The servant informs Kansas that he is, in fact, in front of guests. Suddenly he understands this and calms down. Rika tells her father that they saved her life and healed their people with potions, and also dealt with the magician. She asks permission to introduce him, points to the main character, and says that his name is Ainz. He is a very powerful wizard, and he is pleased to meet the man. And next to him stands Sophia. She is a member of the Order of Silver Knights. The girl also says that she is pleased to meet him. She is a faithful servant of Lord Ainz. The man is surprised that she can hear him and says that he thanks them for saving his daughter. They need to put off talking for later, and now just enjoy the food. They thank the man and start eating. The main character says that everything looks so luxurious. He apologizes for his manners because it is inconvenient to eat with one hand. The man asks not to worry about it. Rika asks Ainz why he doesn't summon his right hand. He says that it is created with the help of magic, but thinks that it can be left unhidden. After all, it arranged such a feast for them. The main character uses the spell activation, the divine hand. It appears to him. The man is surprised by this. The guy is interested in what the dish tastes like and he tries it. The protagonist is in tears and says that it is just bliss. The girl laughs at him. The man notices something. The man asks Sophia about this hand and she understands everything, saying that it is just one of Lord Ainz's spells. The man says that this is the kind of magic that he will never forget, because it is the same as that of the immortal witch. He turns to Mr. Ainz and asks him if he saved her daughter with magic. The guy agrees, and the girl says that everything is correct and it was amazing. The girl, emotionally trying to tell what happened then, the main character understands that it would be worth adding more details, but overall it was very cool. The man understands all this and asks them if their opponent was Corberry. She thanks them for getting rid of him. His plate is empty. He tells them that if they don't mind, then let them visit the castle tomorrow. He wants them to meet with His Majesty. The main character asks about this again. The protagonist says that he doesn't think they should meet him, because he has no training in the manners of communicating with a king, but the man reassures him that he will go with them. In any case, all worries should be left for tomorrow, and today let them have a good rest. They thank for the food. The man asks the servants to take the guests to the room. It is already night outside. The protagonist sighs in relief and says that today was a very eventful day. Ainz lies in the bath, realizing that the most surprising thing was how much the village of Taz had changed. The guy is resting and thinking that it is very interesting where Evan and Celica are now. The man stirs his tea with a spoon and recalls what Mrs. Sophia said, that she is Ainz's servant. His daughter asks about that, and so what? He says that the only one the Silver Knights are willing to serve is the greatest wizard, the white-haired Ainz, but he died long ago. However, no one ever found his body. His daughter asks if he wants to say that this is the same Ainz. However, it was too early to draw any conclusions. They should continue communicating with Ainz, then they would be able to confirm this for sure. The main character sees a stain on his clothes and washes it away with magic. He says that it's good that he noticed the ink stain. Someone addresses him. The main character is surprised by Rika, who is standing in a luxurious dress. She asks him how he is. Ainz smiles and tells her that it suits her very well and that she looks just like a forest fairy. She says that he is a flatterer. The guy understands that Celica taught him how to give compliments. Sophia apologizes for the wait. She also appears in a beautiful outfit and Rika tells her that she looks great. The protagonist thinks that Sophia smells very nice and her hair shines more than usual. The guy touches his hair and says that he needs to at least comb his hair. The man asks them if they are ready to go. Their path leads straight to a huge royal castle, behind which there are mountains. The man in armor announces that His Majesty is standing before them, so let them kneel. All four do so. The man asks Ainz to repeat after him and the boy agrees. He feels like a real knight. Suddenly, the king tells Kansas Brandy to raise his head. The man in armor asks him again, and then the man raises his head. The protagonist thinks that this is very interesting, and after that, the king asks everyone else to raise their heads. They do so after the man in armor repeats the king's order. The king sits on the throne, and next to him there are several other people. On the right is a young, beautiful girl. On the left are two guys. The king tells Kansas Brandy that he is glad to see him, as they have not seen each other since the last conflict with the Empire. The man agrees with this, saying that it was a very brutal battle. The king tells Rika that she has grown so much. The last time he saw her was when she was a child. The girls smile silently. The king also reports that he has received their report, and it is very good that they have captured Corberry. He sits with his eyes closed. They are told that it is a good job, and the protagonist is surprised that the king is so calm, but something is bothering him here. This hall. This room is full of magical energy, and it actually looks very strange, the guy thinks. In addition to the report, the man also reports that it was his daughter who captured Corberry. The king is very surprised by this and asks to tell more details. After this, the king turns to Ainz and asks him what his name is, calling him a youth. At first, Ainz remains silent. Then the man in armor informs him that His Majesty asked him a question, so he must answer. The man turns to the guy in surprise, and then Sophia does too. The guy is surprised. He is thinking about something. Ainz asks Sophia to introduce him, since he has no time to explain. The guy touches the floor and realizes that even it is imbued with magic. The king is surprised by this, and the man in armor starts to get angry at Ainz. Everyone looks at him in shock, and the king starts to laugh. He laughs very loudly and with a smile reports that this is unprecedented impudence. Just like a witch, he says that he will remember Ainz's name. The man sighs and thinks that it is very good that His Majesty is not angry. He is asked whether he is a member of the Order of the Silver Knights. The girl says with a smile that everything is correct. Her name is Sophia. The king says that Commander Gauss often helped him, so why is she here? Suddenly, Ainz interrupts the king, apologizes for this, gets up and says that he needs to inspect this hall. Everyone here is shocked by the guy's fearless act, even the king himself. The man in armor screams and calls the guy impudent, but the king asks Knight to stop, because Ainz is a hero. Knight says that this cannot be forgiven. His behavior can be equated to treason. Knight heads towards the main character, but Sophia stands in his way. He orders her to step back, but the girl says that she swore to always protect her master. The king is surprised that she called him Lord. Rika asks Ainz to stop, because this is treason. The main character asks with a smile what's so special about it. Some kind of magical ritual was performed in this hall, and he just became interested. A hat on the girl, and she says that it is very interesting what could have happened that this boy decided to call her at such an early hour. The maid tells Lieslot that only if she dared to call His Majesty a boy. The girl stands up and says that from her point of view, he is still the same boy. She smiles and says that there is nothing to worry about. The girl holds a beautiful big fan in front of her. They walk forward along the corridor, and the maid asks the girl to hurry, because the audience has already begun, but she does not even remember where this hall is, so the maid will show her. Suddenly the girl complains and is asked what happened. Lieslot says that she really wanted to drink a glass of wine. Let them bring it. The servant is angry about this. She agrees anyway, and angrily walks back. Lieslot asks her to hurry up, because the audience has already begun. She never tires of making fun of children, apologizes for it. The girl looks ahead into the dark corridor and wonders what is going on there. The protagonist stands in front of Sophia, who defends him and apologizes. He felt a strange energy in this room and he was simply overcome by curiosity. Commander Knight gets angry and asks what difference it makes. He is in front of the king, so he must show his loyalty. Ainz asks again about it. The protagonist calmly states that if he swears allegiance to the king, he will betray his allegiance to magic, so this will definitely not happen. Commander Knight gets angry and calls the guy names, but suddenly someone orders him to stop. Lieslot stands calmly before the king and tells the commander that Ainz is not actually their enemy. The commander wants to object, but the king simply tells the girl that she is late. The girl calmly states that she had some business to do, that's all. The main character thanks her for finally meeting her. He activates the divine hand spell. Everyone looks in shock at the main character, whose hand appears and begins to glow very brightly. Everyone is scared by this. Commander Knight looks at this in shock and confusion, as does everyone else gathered in the room. The main character puts the glove on his hand with a smile and asks the girl to show him her magic. The girl gets angry at the guy, then remains silent and simply closes her fan. The main character asks in shock if this is all, if she won't do anything else. Lieselot asks the king if he is now convinced, because he is a real wizard. The king says that it is true. He called his right hand divine, so now he is absolutely sure. The girl also thinks about what this hand looks like and understands everything. Kansas asks for forgiveness and turns to Mrs. Lieselot, telling her his name. She calmly understands that this is the same Kansas. She tells him that he has grown old. The man agrees, saying that they have not seen each other for a long time. The girl is no longer going to endure this disgusting magic. It would be better if her eyes did not see them. Kansas darkened and agreed with her. The girl said that she was going. The king thanked her for everything, and Ainz was perplexed as to why she was leaving here. Brandy and Ainz for this, she only wanted to check if he really had magic. In that case, she was perfect for this. The king suggests moving on to the reward and asks the guy what he wants. Kansas states that if he allows it, he would like Ainz City to be considered the Brandy family's territory, but the king unfortunately cannot help with this. The man understands this and says that Ainz City is an autonomous territory. He just wanted to become its ally. Kansas then asks the king for permission to negotiate with the head of the city, who looks at the guy, who nods and gives his permission to Kansas. In this case, the king grants him the opportunity to conduct negotiations. Kansas thanks him for this. Suddenly, the main character apologizes and turns to the king. Everyone looks at the guy again. Ainz asks the king if he could take a look at the throne. He laughs and says that the guy never ceases to amaze him. A girl with a glass of wine in her hand says that Marquis Brandy has brought a very interesting child. Let them tell her about him. The king states that they know for sure that he is a wizard, but what is the matter? Lieselot says that he claims that his name is Ainz Sylvester. She believes that in fact, this is the very same greatest wizard and author of the original book, The Beginning, the white-haired Ainz. All three are shocked by the girl's thought, and one of the guys says that this cannot be. Her teacher was the demon god Ainz, who was locked in the forest. The glass of wine in her hand is incinerated. It was he who created the concept of magic. She wants to say that troubled times await them. She just wants them to be prepared, because the appearance of a god is always considered a harbinger of trouble. The girl reports that there is nothing more terrible than an awakened deity, in fact. After the audience, two carts, each pulled by two horses, pass each other on the street. The man tells the protagonist that he amazes him. Thank God that the king did not order his execution at all. He became gloomy and folded his arms. He interrogates the guy about what happened to him, whether he felt bad, whether it was too hot in the castle, or on the contrary, too cold. But why did he behave like that? Ainz understands that even though Kansas has such a voice, he is definitely furious. The man needs to calm down. He asks Ainz if he understood everything. Everything went well, but he suddenly changes his mind and understands that it was very bad. The main character looks at the sleeping girl and understands that Rika has fallen asleep, and Sophia has also closed her eyes. He thinks about whether she is angry with him. The guy thinks that he needs to distract himself. Remember, for example, the village of Tas. He remembers that he hasn't met her yet, Silika. Suddenly, she appears in his head in a menacing manner and scolds the guy for the fact that he promised to visit them, whether he got too carried away with magic. These are all pathetic excuses. The main character suddenly gets scared by this, realizing that even in his thoughts he is being scolded. She calls him a real idiot several times. The protagonist arrives, and Kansas is met by the maids, who say that they have prepared food for them. All those who arrived are very tired and thank the maids for their hard work. The girl says that they will prepare desserts for them. Kansas coughs and suggests to forget about it for now. He turns to Ainz and asks how long he will stay in the capital. He thinks yes, and in that case the man wants to say something. The man tells Ainz that he can stay with them as long as he wants, and they will provide him with all the food he needs. The main character is happily surprised by this news and very sincerely thanks Kansas for it. Then the main character went for a walk around the city. He also tried street food, took leisurely baths, and slept a lot. The main character lived an ordinary, quiet life, with white birds flying over his beautiful mansion. Then, the main character sits at the table and drinks coffee from a cup. He understands that everything is very bad, because he relaxed too much. He thinks about how many days have passed already. It was so good here that he completely forgot himself, and then there was such a cold look from the maids, he was a real parasite. He needs to somehow repay Brandy's family after this. He asks one of the maids where Rika is now. She says that her mistress has left. Namely, to train in the garden, she went with Mrs. Sophia. Not far away the entrance exam to the Academy of Magic is taking place. The guy is surprised, remembering this. The main character gets up from the table in a hurry and runs out into the street, saying that today he will help Rika with training, he will definitely be useful. The maid wishes him a good journey. In the middle of the garden, which is located right in front of the mansion, a training fight is taking place. Two girls fight each other, sometimes attacking, sometimes blocking blows, demonstrating their skills. One of the girls' sword flies out of her hands. Rika is on her knees trying to catch her breath. Sophia approaches her. Sophia smiles and tells her friend that her skills have improved a lot, but she still needs to train. If her opponent is physically stronger, she needs to stay vigilant. A maid stands behind her. Rika asks again, but Sophia refuses, saying that they need to take a break. Training in such a state will only bring harm. The girl wants to object, but someone tells them that it was a good fight. Sophia is happy and wishes Ainz a good morning. Rika looks at him in surprise and asks the guy if he is going for a walk again. The guy says that no, because today he decided to help her with training. She understands that he could not withstand the gaze of the maids. Sophia tells Rika that Ainz is a noble man. Lately all he did was be lazy, walk around the city, relax in the bath and sleep until noon, but he never forgot about developing his magic for a second. The guy asks to spare him. Rika says that although she admires his sword skills, they are currently on a break, so it's not meant to be. The guy asks for help. If he doesn't help, then he looks like a parasite. He should at least help somehow. Ainz with a smile why he doesn't train with her, let him show her again that spell he used to defeat the armored grizzly. The main character is very surprised by the girl's proposal, but still agrees, as she wishes. He tells Rika that, of course it's too early to learn something like that, but she can at least watch. He asks her for the sword. She asks in shock what kind of spell it is if he uses magic when he swings the sword. The protagonist asks her to explain how magic works. The girl says that by concentrating magical energy inside the body and then releasing it, it is important to clearly imagine the result of the spell and it will manifest itself. Ainz tells her that she is right. The level of magic is determined by the amount of energy inside their bodies. Concentrating it in the body, they build the foundation of the spell using the spell text. They help it to be released from the body. They draw a path for the magic. Sophia has a high level of magic control and spellcasting, but she is not able to use mass spells. They can be divided into two types, internal and external. The girl is surprised by this. Inner magic is very easy to understand. Just listen to your inner feelings and release it. For example, Sophia recently used a potion. Did she feel something when her wounds healed? The girl gives a positive answer and explains that it feels like something is spreading throughout her body. The main character tells her that it was magical energy. She can still feel it. The girl is silent, closing her eyes. A light appears around the girl, and opening her eyes, she says that she really feels something. The main character says that it is great. The feeling is like a physical boost. Rika asks Ainz to wait and asks him if she will be able to feel it then. She also has some magic, but why can't she do it? The main character admits that it's all about her movements. She moves a little incorrectly. She is surprised by this and asks again. He says that the main thing is not to make the slightest mistake. She must clearly understand how each muscle in the whole body works. Without this knowledge, if you use strengthening, you can completely destroy the body. The girl will keep this in mind. Rika asks if it turns out that the whole point is that Sophia is much stronger and has better control over her body. The main character says that this is exactly the case. The protagonist tells Sophia to use body strengthening. He will not hold back. He also asks her to move away and then even further. She asks if this is enough, but the guy orders them to move even further. He tells Rika that it will be quite dangerous here, so she should move aside. The girl, like the maid, is very surprised by this. The main character stands in front of Sophia, ready, with girls standing to the side watching them. Rika is very surprised by this. The maid informs him that his sword will not reach Sophia. The main character asks her if she is ready. The girl stands calmly in front of him and agrees. Then she warns him that she is attacking. Suddenly she lunges at him, but he counterattacks the girl, which shocks Rika. Even Sophia herself is surprised by this. Rika understands that even from such a distance he was able to strike her. The main character asks the girl if she understands now. Now it is his turn. He is moving forward. Then the guy attacks Sophia, but she calmly blocks the blow. The next moment the guy attacks her again, and after that she flew back. After this, everything around there begins to collapse, making it impossible to see anything. Both girls silently watch this. Rika asks her maid if she sees them. The girl, perplexed, says no. However, she can only say with certainty that the boss will not be very happy. The girl and the main character look in shock at the fact that they destroyed everything around them. Kansas, with a grim expression, thanks them for plowing up their garden so that now they can even organize a small town here. He also says that this was his favorite garden. If they needed vegetables so much, they could just ask for them. From now on, they will eat only them. The guy understands that it would be better if he just went for a walk. There are only 2 weeks left until Rika's entrance exam, and in that time she has been training very hard with her sword. Sophia asks the girl not to rush, because she needs to focus on her movements. The girl agrees with this. Ainz stands with a calm expression on his face. Casting spells is just one way to manifest magic. There is no need to limit your thinking to just that. The girl agrees with this argument. She says that when she gets used to it enough, then she will be able to become a real magician. After that, the girl is already without strength. The man approaches Mr. Ainz and Sophia, asking them if they will be attending the exam with Rika. They all sit together at the table, and the main character immediately announces that he is not at all against it. In addition, Ainz is interested in how high the level of the magicians of this academy is. Kansas is glad to hear this. The girl asks her father not to worry, because she will definitely cope. The man says that, of course, he believes in her. The main character asks if he can also take part in the exam, or if there might be some problems with it. Kansas informs him that the application period has already passed, but one servant is allowed to take with him to the exam, so he can go with Rika as a servant. The protagonist agrees with this. Rika embarrassedly says that since he is now her servant, he will carry out her orders. The guy says that he will do anything, but the girl says that she was joking. Sophia says that then she too can send herself as a servant of the servant. However, this is impossible, and the girl says that she will not leave Lord Ainz's Ard. On the day of the exam, the main character is informed that they have finally arrived. He asks if this is a magic academy. It is very spacious here. Rika asks Ainz where he is going, since servants cannot leave their masters. The main character looks at the crowd of people and asks if they are all students. There are a lot of them. Rika reports that ordinary people can also attend the exam. Someone greets a girl. A young girl approaches her, behind whom a guy in glasses walks calmly. Rika recognizes Kirsha. She wishes her good morning and is glad that she came too. It's good that she is here because she is so worried. The guy greets her. It is Seidel and they haven't seen each other for a long time. Is he here as a servant? He agrees. The main character greets the princess. She says that they haven't seen each other for a long time, whether he is Ainz. The guy apologizes for his behavior last time. She tells him that he made a real show. Seidel understands that he is the one who was recognized by Mrs. Leslot. Is he also taking the exam? The guy says that no, he is here as Rika's servant. He just wanted to see the academy. And Mrs. Leslot, is that the woman in the red dress? Kirsha reports that this is true. She is a court magician and her father's advisor. Someone greets all the students. Everyone looks there. A guy with a loudspeaker and a piece of paper in his hands announces that first they will all have a written test, and they must sit down according to their number. The main character is surprised and asks if this is a magical instrument that amplifies the voice, and how he didn't think of it before. Rika tells Ainz that she is going and that he should wish her luck. The guy says that she can handle it. The man asks the observers to go to the waiting area. Seidel suggests Ainz to go, and he agrees. One disgruntled guy says whether this is a place to wait. Why are the chairs so uncomfortable? He is actually a servant of Darius from the Sobi house. Seidel adjusts his glasses and says that while he brags about serving in the Sobi family at any opportunity, he understands that it is better not to interfere in this at all. A guy with a loudspeaker announces that the written exam has begun, and many students are sitting at tables. They are writing something diligently. Ainz asks Seidel what kind of test this is. The guy answers that mathematics, history, magical knowledge, spellcasting, these 4 areas are included in this exam. Even with tutors, it is very difficult to prepare for it. The protagonist understands this and asks what is so difficult about it. Seidel says that he doesn't know, that the problem is in the paper. The main character looks at the paper and thinks with a serious face about what this is. Everything is mixed up here. Seidel says that now he understands that this is not an ordinary paper, but a magical instrument. Before he sees the questions, the exam itself needs to be structured. The guy is surprised by this. He asks what other magical tools exist. He gives examples, and the guy is surprised by everything. The main character understands that this is strange, because has the world really changed so much in the last few years? The guy with the loudspeaker tells everyone that they are finished. Now they will have a break, and they can rest for now. Rika sighs with relief. Ainz says that it was good work. Seidel tells Kirsha that she did a good job too. Kirsha asks him to address her simply by her name. He says that she is a princess. She asks what is so special about it. Let him just speak more freely. The guy calls her simply by her first name, and the girl says that there is no need for formalities, to talk to her as a friend. The guy comes up and says that this is His Highness Princess Kirsha. He is the eldest son of the Marquis of Sobi, Daria Sobi. Nice to meet you, girl, it's mutual. Daria smiles and tells Rika that she is also here. Did she come for the exam? She angrily asks about it. So what, they are the same age. He asks why she needs magic. Let her go work in the bakery. Their territory is famous for its wheat. It will be difficult for her here. She demands that he shut up. She has learned a lot from her servant. She tells him that his name is Ainz, which makes the arrogant guy very surprised. Suddenly he starts laughing very loudly and asks her if she learned from the servant and what she managed to learn from some cripple. She tells him that he is laughing in vain, because Ainz is the best candidate for knights. Everyone is surprised by this. He asks if she means to say that he, a swordmaster, would lose to a guy without an arm and a leg. The girl demands that they not judge his strength by his appearance. The main character becomes interested in this. The guy's servant demands that he fight him. Someone orders them to stop. The guy comes up and tells them that they are now within the walls of a magic academy. Everyone is surprised by this. Everyone understands that it is Harold and bows their heads before him. They all fall silent before him. The guy is told that if he starts a fight here, he will only disgrace the family name. He can continue after the exam, if they want. He can be their judge. The guy is fine with this. He asks Ainz what he will say to this. He thanks him for the offer, however. Rika angrily nudges him in the side, and then he agrees. Harold asks to entrust this matter to him. He will prepare everything. The guy tells the main character that he should just try to escape. Rika shouts that the same applies to him. Seidel suggests that they go out for lunch instead, and he asks Mrs. Rocky where she would like to go. Rika thanks for the food and tells the servant that, as always, he exceeded her expectations. He also prepared coffee. The main character wishes everyone a pleasant appetite. The guy remembers and asks about what a swordmaster and a swordsman saint are. The princess explains to him that these are titles from the Galen Empire. The guy explains that their skills are divided into 4 levels: Swordmaster, Sword Saint, Sword Emperor, and Sword God. Tardish is currently at the Swordmaster level. Let him be careful. Ainz understands that this is all too complicated. Rika happily tells him that it's okay, because he'll beat him in a second. The guy asks him to forget about it. He drinks coffee and announces that, in addition, he will soon see the practical exam. The organizer welcomes everyone. This is where their practical part of the exam will take place. They will evaluate each one individually. When their name is called, let them come forward. People use and demonstrate their spells. Some succeed, and some not so much. The main character says that there is nothing special here. The guy next to him laughs and tells him that he is right, but that is why they want to enter the academy. He understands without a doubt. The guy looks thoughtfully at the students' abilities and understands that Rika will beat them all. Next is Rika Brandy. She happily comes forward. They ask her to show them a fire and water ball. A guy from the crowd says that it's okay if it turns out to be flour. This is her calling. The girl begins. The girl silently casts a fireball, and everyone is surprised by this, asking if they heard the spell, but no one heard it. They are all amazed by this silent magic, because it is a very cool phenomenon. Even the examiners are shocked by what is happening. Then Rika is going to demonstrate the water ball. She casts a water ball, and people are surprised that it is silent magic again. Everyone is shocked by it. The examiners ask the girl about mid-rank magic, such as a fire spear, and the girl agrees. She concentrates and casts a shortened spell, closing her eyes to avoid distractions. Everyone is shocked, thinking that this can't be a shortened spell, a similar technique for mid-level magic. This is the level of an academy graduate. The girl uses a fire spear. Everyone is surprised again. Now she understands. The magic that Ainz taught her is really... It's very unbelievable. The guy with glasses is shocked by this, and the main character silently and emotionlessly looks at it. The girl stands confidently, and people are surprised to discuss whether it was mid-level magic, but it is also a silent spell. The guy with glasses thinks that it was incredible. He asks Ainz if he taught her this. He agrees and says that he taught her today. The judges ask the girl if she can also master high-level magic, and the girl happily gives a positive answer. She apologizes for not being able to use it at the moment. She looks at the judges. The judges are confused by this and ask her if something happened. Maybe she could at least try. The girl refuses. It is still too early for her. She is not capable enough to control it. They understand her and ask her to show them her favorite spell. In this case, one judge looks questioningly at the girl. Reika agrees and decides that she will cast a silent spell of triple fire spear. She uses it, and everyone is shocked by it. The princess happily tells Reika that this is simply incredible. She looks at the main character. The girl thinks that Ainz taught her, which means that he is also an amazing wizard. The guy does not understand why the princess is already looking at him. After the practical exam, a fencing test was held. The judges wrote something down. The exam itself lasted until the evening. The results will be known a little later. After the exam, everyone will leave. And then, the main character stood there with annoyance on his face and thought that he had some kind of problem. The duel involves Ainz and Tarish. They will fight with wooden swords. Offensive magic is prohibited here. He will lose if he surrenders or can no longer continue the fight. Naturally, killing your opponent is strictly prohibited. He asks if they understand the rules, and the dark-haired guy gives a positive answer. In this case, the leader tells them to choose a sword for themselves. The guy comes up and takes the sword. The guy asks the protagonist not to worry because he will try not to hurt him. Ainz informs him that injuries are inevitable in duels. The guy pompously asks the main character to be careful, because he might end up without his second hand. The main character agrees, and with a sad expression on his face, says that he is simply horrified. His rival is angry because of this. The presenter raises his hand and gives an order. Them to get ready, then he lowers his hand and shouts for them to begin. Ainz's enemy raises his sword above himself. The protagonist successfully dodges his enemy's huge sword and silently looks straight at him. He makes an attack, the guy dodges, and he immediately attacks again, but fails to hit Ainz. The girl thinks that Ainz is not having an easy time, but the guy says that he is dodging all attacks. While using minimal strength, he probably wants to wear him out. The main character's enemy confesses to him that he impressed him, and he says that he should not expect mercy. He holds the sword with one hand, and the guy with glasses is surprised that he took a two-handed sword with one hand. Ainz himself is surprised by this. The main character understands that, of course, attack spells are prohibited, but magical control has not been cancelled. He attacks his opponent. Suddenly, Ainz's opponent pushes the guy back, causing him to crash into the wall behind him. Ainz's friends look at him with excitement. Everyone is watching this and rooting for Ainz and then for his enemy. The guy stands in front of the guy and thinks that he used control. If not for that, then his blow would have crushed all his bones. He was just lucky. The protagonist stands on his feet and says that in order to avoid injury, he strengthened his body with the help of magical control. He says that if he was even a second late, he could have died. The main character tells the enemy that he has no other choice. He must get ready because he is attacking. The guy is shocked that he is using the sun glare. At that moment, Ainz appears right at him and attacks. The protagonist reports that, as he said, he has sufficient fencing skills, but he is not as noble as the knights. The guy gets angry and attacks the guy, but he dodges. The main character looks at something in bewilderment. He thinks that this is the end, but his enemy shouts at him that he is dreaming. He sharply attacks him. The guy with glasses is shocked as he thinks about how he was able to hit with the sword at such an angle. The guy starts to get annoyed, but his sword breaks. Reika, Seidel, and Kiri, overcome with great excitement, watched the unfolding action without stopping, not holding back their enthusiastic exclamations associated with the sword. Harold, on the contrary, watched the progress of the duel with visible tension, while Darius was already experiencing obvious relief, internally anticipating a quick and, as it seemed to him, inevitable victory. It was at this critical moment that Tarish suddenly stopped moving and brought his massive weapon down with a deafening clang on his opponent's thin blade, instantly splitting it in two. The swordmaster couldn't help but remark anxiously that the current situation was a serious danger. Then, confidently pointing his surviving weapon towards the now defenseless Ainz, the man loudly proclaimed his ultimate superiority and right to triumph. However, something completely unexpected happened. To the deepest amazement of the fighter himself, the weapon he had just been clutching tightly in his hands suddenly shattered into countless tiny fragments. The young man, who had been the target of this sword, only calmly looked at this strange and inexplicable spectacle. Rika and her companions were literally dumbfounded, standing with their mouths wide open at what they saw. Even the judge could not hide his fear at such an unexpected turn of events. Darius, however, was overcome with fear and suddenly recoiled in his chair. Tarish himself was in a state of complete shock, continuing to mechanically squeeze his empty hand, which had been deprived of his powerful two-handed sword. At that moment, the magician's eye underwent a noticeable change, narrowing. Calmly, as if stating a fact, he explained that he had focused a significant amount of magical energy and directed its shockwave at the enemy's weapon, adding that achieving the necessary compression density of this energy required considerable effort from him. Then Harold, despite the anxiety that had overwhelmed him, remembered his direct duties as a judge. He raised his hand and, slightly stumbling from excitement, officially declared the duel over, citing the fact that both participants had lost their weapons. His Highness, having weighed the circumstances, declared the result of the fight a draw. Upon hearing this verdict, Darius almost jumped up in his seat from indignation, while the rest of those present silently, but with obvious tension, accepted this decision. Returning in the gathering twilight of the night city, Rika, filled with sincere admiration, persistently asked Ainz if he noticed the expressions on Darius and Tarish's faces when the result was announced. She repeatedly, tirelessly, called this scene a truly incomparable spectacle. With a broad, satisfied smile, the lady declared that, despite the formal draw, for her personally, this outcome was an absolute, indisputable victory. Then, with a sudden surge of slight excitement and a somewhat silly smile, she fixed her gaze on the servant who was silently walking ahead. The girl suddenly became restless and began to shift nervously from foot to foot, while the young man, seemingly not noticing her condition, continued to walk forward. Suddenly, Rika, clasping her hands in silent supplication and bursting into tears, began to offer Ainz her most sincere apologies for her unbridled, violent nature, which had caused him so much unnecessary trouble. The main character, turning around in surprise at her words, hastened to assure her that nothing terrible had happened and that he held no grudge against her at all. Lights were already coming on in the windows of the houses they passed, creating a contrast with the darkness of the street, while the companions continued their conversation. The lady, still agitated, explained the reason for her anxiety. The boy had maintained a stubborn silence the entire way, which made her think badly. The servant hastened to apologize for his inattention, explaining that he had simply been lost in his own thoughts, to which Rika immediately asked what exactly he had been thinking about. Recalling the difficult duel that had just ended, Ainz shared his thoughts. He was particularly interested in the question related to what he had heard from the boys earlier, that by imperial standards, Tarish had reached the level of a swordmaster and at the same time skillfully combined the use of a blade with the use of magic. The girl could not hide her surprise when she learned that her recent opponent also had magical abilities. The main character only increased her amazement by adding that, in the magical art, Tarish, in his opinion, even surpasses Sophia. Thinking out loud and with a slight smile, the young man continued to develop his thought. If now this man is considered only a master of the sword, then it is difficult to even imagine how powerful the holders of higher ranks must be. The servant, with a happy smile, admitted that he was extremely intrigued by all this, as he had never before imagined that magic could be integrated into the art of fencing in such an original and effective way. Rika, with her eyes wide open, looked Ainz intently and with incomprehension. The girl was suddenly overcome with fear, and a serious doubt arose in her head. Was the person in front of her even a person? Continuing to walk slowly along the night street, the boy, however, expressed disappointment with the level of the academy. The lady, who was persistently following him, replied that, unfortunately, nothing could be done about it, because he himself was simply too outstanding, an amazing person compared to them. The young man tried to doubt this, but Rika, laughing joyfully, instantly dispelled his modest objections. Ainz had previously been granted an audience with His Majesty himself in the royal castle. Now, in the monarch's luxurious chambers, in addition to the usual retinue of servants, there was a mysterious woman speaking out loud about the need to be prepared for anything. Her hand was clutching a crystal goblet from which a light, ominous smoke suddenly began to rise. Gradually, right before everyone's eyes, the glass began to dissolve, while the woman calmly continued to develop her thought, hinting that everyone present already knew something about the impending threat. She finished her thought with an ingratiating intonation, reminding him that there was nothing more terrible than an awakened deity, while Ainz's sarcastic smile clearly surfaced in her memory. The monarch kept an absolutely impenetrable expression on his face, only tensely silent, while signs of growing anxiety were clearly visible on Harold's face. The third person present, a man of a stocky build with large features, crossed his arms over his chest, with noticeable anxiety asked if she meant by this that a terrible, inescapable curse was about to befall them. The woman, with a curvaceous figure and an emotionless face, coldly stated that this young man's magic only filled her with the deepest disgust, adding that if he really intended to destroy the country, there would be very few forces that could stop him. The king, in turn, also recalled with undisguised excitement the oath that Ainz had given them. The same youth added that, in addition to the potential threat from Ainz, there was also the problem of the possible publicity of the reasons for Princess Kirsch's departure from the academy, which would inevitably cause serious complications in the Magic Academy. Another advisor, the third participant in the conversation, noted with obvious concern in his voice that Kansas Brandy and his influence should not be underestimated under any circumstances. The woman, crossing her arms over her chest and putting on a serious expression, analyzed the current situation, although Brandy formally insisted on the cooperation of their territories. In fact, the one who would undoubtedly manage the entire process would be Ainz. Moreover, judging by the behavior and hints of that woman, Sophia, it can be confidently stated that the Silver Knights already guessed or even knew about the true, hidden identity of the magician. His Highness also became deeply immersed in thought, unable to find a logical explanation for why a divine entity, which the protagonist could be, would need to cooperate with Brandy. Harold, with his hand on his heart, promised the monarch to keep a close eye on Kirsche and Ainz, especially since he had to study at the academy for another year. The king did not raise any objections to this plan. Suddenly, the silence of the chambers was broken by a cautious knock on the door, distracting the monarch from his oppressive thoughts. A servant appeared in the doorway, respectfully reminding His Majesty of the imminent start of an important meeting devoted to the financial situation of the kingdom. In response, the old king promised to arrive as soon as possible. As he left, the monarch turned to Lieselot to say goodbye. In response, the woman declared with icy calm that while the protagonist was busy with his stupid plans, she did not care at all about his actions, but he had committed the unforgivable. He had raised his hand against her. Squinting her piercing eyes and demonstrating the utmost seriousness of her intentions with her whole appearance, the girl declared that if something like this were to happen even one more time, she would no longer show even a shadow of her previous leniency. The monarch, looking back at her words, said with obvious alarm in his voice that he would certainly take her warning into account. A few days later, within the castle walls, nestled near the majestic towers of the castle is a modest two-story building made of dark stone. The barred door and heavily armed guards next to the small reception window all indicated that this was the entrance to the prison. Behind the first grate was an even more massive, dark and tightly locked door, equipped with only a tiny viewing window. Inside this small cell, a man sat, shackled in heavy stocks. In his inner voice, he complained about the unbearable boredom that had overtaken him in this confinement. A contemptuous smile played across his lips as he reflected on the fact that the guards here were all inexperienced youngsters, completely incapable of anything serious, and therefore he could easily spend an eternity within these walls without experiencing any particular inconvenience. Suddenly, the prisoner heard the familiar creak of a massive door being unlocked. When the door swung open, the man grinned loudly and defiantly at the new arrivals and declared that he had already told them more than once that he would not tell them anything, unless they finally came to their senses and brought him a delicious, juicy steak and some good booze. In the dim light of the corridor, coming from behind the door, the silhouette of a woman in a wide-brimmed hat was outlined. She expressed mild surprise at the fact that the prisoner was still alive. The prisoner sullenly, through clenched teeth, asked who she was and what she needed here. At this point, the woman's maid, who had remained outside the cell, anxiously warned her mistress, Lieselot, that they had very little time. The woman in the hat only smiled in Moraine's direction and replied that she understood the warning perfectly. The slave, having seen the woman enter in the dim light, was clearly surprised. An obscene smile spread across his face, and with a hoarse laugh he asked if they had decided to reward him in such a peculiar way for his steadfastness during the torture. As the lady approached him, the man muttered happily to himself that the warden had apparently finally remembered his requests. Suddenly, to the prisoner's complete amazement, Lislot gracefully sat down in midair, as if she were landing on an invisible chair. He thought for a moment and then asked with sudden wariness in his voice if his guest was a sorceress. Keeping her composure, she continued to sit in the open air and declared that she had come there for two specific reasons. The first was to finally obtain information about a very important book, and it had to be original. At these words, the prisoner suddenly raised his head, clearly alarmed by such a request. Lislot calmly explained that the book was too dangerous and needed to be found as soon as possible. She added that it was useless for the prisoner to hide anything while his body was bound by magic. The man listened to her in deathly silence. He asked if the book posed a personal danger to her. The woman replied with icy certainty that she had not at all, since she had read something similar before. At this statement, the prisoner only looked at her with even greater concern. Then the prisoner clearly remembered that sinister, terrifying smile of Ainz, and a new wave of fear came over him at the thought that Lislot might be as powerful and ruthless as he was. At this time, the girl, with a light, almost playful smile, made it clear that she would not use force to get answers, but she had one question for him. He instantly became serious and, with great internal tension, forced out of himself that he would tell everything he knew. The lady only smirked in response, trying to calm the prisoner with assurances that she was not going to force him to answer against his will. However, just as he was beginning to relax, something small and incredibly fast shot down with force towards his shackled hands. He groaned in pain, his eyes widening as he looked down at his hand. To his surprise, the index finger on his right hand was missing. In its place was a neat, burnt-looking wound. With a mad, inhuman expression on her suddenly distorted face, Lislot demanded an immediate answer. Where had the slave gotten the original book, and why, in the copy she knew of, several key pages were missing? While the prisoner was in a state of shock, not understanding what had just happened and drenched in cold sweat from the fear that had gripped him, the woman perceived his numbness and silence as a challenge, a call to increase the pressure. Looking down at him phlegmatically, the tormentor asked with feigned bewilderment whether he had suddenly forgotten how to talk. Then his guest decided to remind him, and the man's finger next to the severed one turned into a pathetic, bloody stump in the same way. Shaking his whole body from unbearable pain, the prisoner screamed in an inhuman voice. Through sobs and groans, he tearfully cried out that he understood everything and begged her to stop. Slouched under the weight of pain and fear, shaking all over as if in a fever, the prisoner, barely catching his breath, began to tell Lislot in a halting tone. He said that the book in question was a copy from the original series that Ainz Sylvester had. The woman, maintaining an icy seriousness, demanded an immediate continuation. But the slave, bowing his head and falling silent, suddenly stopped answering, only continuing to convulsively tremble from the residual spasms of pain and fear. Realizing that she would not wait for a voluntary continuation, the lady with a terrifyingly calm smile suggested that, apparently, the man wanted a continuation. Immediately after her quietly spoken phrase, the prison walls again resounded with his heart-rending screams. When the fourth finger had already suffered the same terrible fate, the prisoner, finally, in a strangled, choking and constantly stumbling voice, continued. This damned book had long ago been divided into several separate parts, and they, his former comrades, had only one part, in the form of a holy relic. Lislot asked again with a clarifying intonation whether they were really talking about a relic. At that moment, the prisoner, having gathered his last strength, shouted that it was high time for her to leave because the time allotted to her by that woman outside had long since expired. The woman merely smiled at this statement, realizing that the prisoner meant Muraine, and asked him not to worry unnecessarily about such trifles as time. The lady explained to him quite calmly that all the time they spent here in the cell was only a moment for the outside world. The man stared at his tormentor in bewilderment, slowly realizing the terrifying meaning of her words. She was hinting at a complete stop in time around him. Standing up in amazement, he loudly, almost hysterically declared that such a thing was simply impossible, and that time-stopping magic did not exist in principle. He shouted, asking if she could imagine how many of the greatest magicians had struggled over the centuries to create such a spell. The prisoner, with despair in his voice, screamed that all this was a brazen, shameless lie. Lislot just yawned in boredom and indifferently reminded him that she had never claimed to have used magic. As he cried out in bewilderment, turning into hysteria, the woman smiled slyly and explained that what she had used was witchcraft. This information completely shocked the prisoner, leaving him speechless. Then the slave, in a state of deep shock, remembered how Ainz had activated a spell called Divine Hand in their last fight. After this memory, the guest, smoothly rising from her invisible chair, asked what exactly he had seen. Having received the answer about Ainz's right hand, she decided to show him something with the same mysterious smile. Coming close to the trembling prisoner, she bent down and ran the object in her hands down his shackled arms, thus activating the spell known as flow acceleration. Immediately after this, the man's entire right wrist burst into flames, a bright, devouring flame. He screamed as he had never screamed before, tears of pain and horror streaming down his face. Smiling, the tormentor asked him how he liked the sensation, explaining that the point of the spell was to speed up the passage of time for the chosen subject, allowing her to savor every moment of his unbearable suffering. It was at that moment that what remained of his arm, charred and smoldering, suddenly yanked itself free of its shackles. Noticing this unexpected release, Leslot, grinning maliciously, said that since nothing was holding him back anymore, the exit from the cell was immediately to the left and then up. The prisoner, with blackened eyes, drooling and foaming, could only utter a hoarse, intermittent question, "Why is she doing this to him?" In response, the woman gave her name, Leslot. She added that she, however, has another name by which she is known in certain circles. Leslot called herself the Immortal Witch. At that moment, the man howled from a new wave of pain that shook his crippled body. The tormentor, giggling awkwardly, took this cry for inappropriate delight, saying that he was not alone in his feelings. Opening her fan, she extended her other hand to her exposed thigh, quietly saying that she was already exhausted from the anticipation of what her own death would be like. Biting her lower lip, she released all remaining restrictions from the flow acceleration spell, unleashing all of its monstrous power on him. The prison still stood motionless in the silent darkness of the night, giving no sign of the horror that was happening inside one of its cells. At that moment, the door to that very cell quietly opened, and Mrs. Leslot came out to her patiently waiting maid, sheepishly apologizing to her for not being able to resist. Moraine, however, expressed obvious bewilderment, since, from her point of view, the woman had only just entered the cell. The witch only playfully called herself silly in response, saying that she had almost let it slip. Confidently striding forward, Leslot said that, in any case, she had finished her business, and therefore it was high time to return, while she was clearly wondering out loud about what kind of sacred relic figured in the prisoner's story. The maid nodded silently and slowly walked after her mistress. However, passing the door of the cell, Moraine stopped with irresistible curiosity. She squinted at the barred window in the door, trying to see through the bars what had happened inside. Leslot, without turning around, continued talking, expressing surprise at how much this prisoner seemed to know. The woman added with a slight smile that in the end, it all turned out to be simple. In the pitch darkness of his cell, the man, bent over, still sat gloomily in his chair, but it was impossible to discern his true state in this impenetrable darkness. At this time, Rika and Ainz safely returned to the spacious Kansas mansion. The father of the family was sincerely happy to see his daughter and with genuine excitement immediately began asking about how the entrance exam to the academy went. Here, Brandy Kansas, as if suddenly remembering something, switched his attention and suggested that everyone first go to dinner to refresh themselves after a long day, immediately ordering the maid list to immediately prepare everything necessary for the meal. The girl just chuckled to herself, watching such a typical fatherly reaction. The main character, standing next to her, also couldn't help but smile lightly, cheerfully, looking at this warm family scene. Suddenly, another figure approached the guy from the depths of the hall to greet him. It was Sophia, who, putting her hand to her chest, greeted the young man with a sincere smile. The magician, smiling back at her, said that he had returned. Soon the table in the dining room was generously set with a variety of dishes. Rika, with bright gestures, began to tell her father about the exam, especially emphasizing the important moment when she suddenly remembered the lessons taught to her by Ainz, which surprised the teachers. Meanwhile, the maid Leaf was carefully fussing around the guests. The father, listening to his daughter, was clearly bursting with pride for his girl, and he called her a good girl. Then the girl, accompanying her story with noisy gestures, began to describe how tough the main character was during his duel with Darius's servant. She depicted their fight in a very peculiar way, ending with them properly teaching this impudent fellow a lesson. Leaf was clearly dissatisfied with the too violent and, in her opinion, not entirely appropriate behavior of the young lady. Sophia, hearing the mention of a duel, was clearly astonished by the news that the young man had crossed blades with none other than a master of the sword. The guy, happily sipping a delicious drink, confirmed what Rika had told him. The hum of cheerful conversations and laughter came from the house. While the cup of coffee was cooling on the table, Brandy expressed his sincere gratitude to Ainz. He said that there were still a few days left before the official announcement of the exam results, and asked what the young man planned to do in that time. He, sipping his already cooling coffee, replied that he did not know and sank into thoughtfulness. Then the protagonist, addressing the head of the family directly, recalled the throne of His Majesty, from which, as it seemed to him, a very strange, frightening aura emanated. He said that he had a desire to check it out, but did not finish the sentence. Kansas assured him that he was ready to personally find out the necessary information from His Majesty, if the young man was ready to wait a little. He responded with a slight smile, assuring him that there was no need to hurry. After that, he shared his immediate plans for the next day. Ainz said that during his stay in the kingdom, he had already explored almost its entire center, and now he had a desire to go to the western outskirts tomorrow to explore it as well. The aristocrat nodded and warned that the west was mainly a shopping area and advised caution. Rising from the table, Sophia suddenly and decisively declared that she would certainly accompany him on this excursion. The protagonist took this news with obvious confusion but did not openly object and instead turned to Rika with the hope that she would also join them. However, the girl politely but firmly refused, explaining that she had already promised to meet Princess Kirsha tomorrow. The young man, darkening for a moment, mentally came to the disappointing conclusion that they would have to go alone with Sophia, which made him feel uneasy. Sophia herself, on the contrary, was beaming with delight and immediately hastened to assure him that there was absolutely nothing to worry about, because she would protect her master from any possible threat. At that moment, the boy had an ironic thought that most of the threats were precisely her fault. After all the plans for tomorrow were finally decided, Ainz stood up from the table, saying that he would take his leave and go to rest. The head of the family, of course, did not detain him but kindly let him go. The maidless opened the door with deep respect for those leaving. Brandy and the protagonist, having exchanged farewell wishes for a good night, went out into the hall. The girls remained sitting at the table. Rika watched them carefully, waiting for the heavy oak door to close behind them completely. Only then, with a suddenly brightening smile, she turned to Sophia and addressed her, remembering that she had gone shopping in the city today. The girl was very interested in whether her friend had bought anything interesting. Sophia answered affirmatively and, awkwardly bowing in response to the interest, continued to repeat sincere, respectful thanks for the opportunity to make these purchases. Rika gently gestured for her to stop, saying that she had absolutely nothing to be thankful for. Smiling broadly, she continued, saying that she was looking forward to tomorrow with great anticipation. Over the Kansas estate, announcing the arrival of a new day. The bright rays of the morning sun fell from the window directly onto Ainz's face, who was sleeping peacefully in his cozy and soft bed. At that moment, someone gently but persistently knocked on the door of his room, immediately apologizing for disturbing him from sleep. The man at the door announced that breakfast had long been served and was almost finished, and respectfully asked the gentleman to hurry up if he wished to make it. The latter, with obvious displeasure, answered with an affirmative moan through his sleep. Soon, the protagonist was hunched over and following List down the hall, apologizing for oversleeping and asking if everyone had finished breakfast. The maid answered positively, explaining that Mr. Kansas had gone to the royal castle on business and that Mrs. Rika had also left. To the young man's chagrin, according to the girl, Sophia had been patiently waiting for him in the dining room for a long time. She added, with slight embarrassment, that the gentleman, in addition to breakfast, would also have a small pleasant surprise. The guy looked at her questioningly with his mismatched eyes. The maid merely opened the door to the dining room, letting Ainz in first. He walked in with a polite smile, wishing Sophia a good morning and apologizing once again for the long wait. A completely transformed Sophia appeared before the main character. She stood, slightly nervously fingering the edge of her dress, and shyly wished him good morning in response. The girl looked unusually beautiful and feminine. She was wearing a new, elegant dress, and the headband in her hair emphasized her unusually loose, softly wavy locks. It seemed that the young man was genuinely surprised to see her in such an unusual appearance. He even involuntarily grabbed the back of the nearest chair. Sophia, noticing his reaction, was afraid that she looked strange, thinking that this look probably did not suit her at all. Then the guy, coming to his senses, hastened to assure her of the opposite, firmly asserting that the dress suited her incredibly well. Ainz openly praised her, saying that she looked simply stunning in this outfit, just like a real lady. The escort, embarrassed even more by such words, timidly asked permission not to take the sword with her on a walk, as it could ruin the outfit. The protagonist easily allowed it, answering that it was just a walk around the city. The guy, still under the impression, noted with delight that, to tell the truth, in this image, Sophia looks better and more attractive than in her usual armor. The girl opened her mouth from surprise and obvious awkwardness at these words. A bright blush appeared on her cheeks. Then she, smiling broadly and happily, confirmed that she thought so too, and warmly thanked him for the compliment. Together with his unusually elegant girlfriend, the guy set off on his journey. List, having seen them to the door, bowed and wished them a good journey. The western district of the capital greeted them with the bustle of many small houses, closely huddled together, and in the distance they could even see the outlines of a small castle. Pedestrians of all kinds scurried along the narrow streets, and horse-drawn carriages and carts occasionally passed along the slightly wider thoroughfares. Looking around, Ainz noted that the shopping district, despite the noise, made a much more pleasant impression than the others. Sophia could not help but agree with his observation. The men passing by involuntarily slowed down, noting to themselves the girl's cute and attractive appearance. Then Sophia, distracted from her contemplation, addressed the gentleman with a direct question. She was interested in the real reason why he wanted to go here, to this area. He hesitated for a moment, as if searching for words. And then, smiling mysteriously at the corners of his lips, he replied that he had a certain desire to check and find out something. Sophia asked again whether he meant something specific, and the guy only nodded affirmatively in response. Recalling yesterday at the academy, the protagonist shared with her his observations that he saw quite a lot of guys there during the exam who clearly did not belong to aristocratic families. He noted that they were unlikely to be very rich and could afford expensive tutors, but despite this, the level of their magical abilities was quite comparable to that of noble students. After that, his escort quickly understood where the young man was heading. He wanted to know how these children from simple families were able to learn magic without access to traditional teachers. Sophia suggested that perhaps here in this area there was some unofficial teacher of magic or some place where they were taught. The guy confirmed that her guesses completely coincided with his thoughts. Ainz, stopping in front of a busy road, said that he, unfortunately, was the first time in this area and had no idea where to look for such places or people. Then he suggested that they just walk around and look around since they had plenty of time. A few hours later, the protagonist, exhausted, was already sincerely regretting that before setting out on his journey he had not thought to find out at least some information from Mr. Kansas. The girl, noticing his fatigue, asked if he wanted to go back already. The guy, exhausted from the long walk, answered affirmatively. However, looking around the surrounding streets with a serious expression on his face, he suddenly remembered another place in this area that they had not yet looked at. Sophia, following his gaze, immediately understood what place he was thinking about. It turned out that they had not yet been to the slums. Here reigned a completely different, poor and dismal atmosphere, tiny, slanted houses, between which washed laundry hung on lines. There was trash everywhere, uncollected by anyone. Right on the street, under a canopy made of boards and rags, resembling an improvised hut, sat an elderly homeless man, frowning at the people passing by. While Ainz looked at the cracked facades and sagging fences with genuine interest, the girl walked beside him in silence. She noted with sadness that the atmosphere here was completely different. Then a sharp, rude cry reached their ears. Someone was commanding, in a thievish manner, to immediately hand over something. Sophia immediately frowned. The guy only slightly opened his eyes, looking much less interested and worried than his companion. When they approached the source of the noise, they were met with a dismal sight. 5 large men were bending over a little girl curled up on the ground. The little girl was crying and asking them to stop, explaining that this was the last thing she had left. Sitting right on her dirty knees in front of them, the little girl tearfully begged the bandits to leave her alone. But the leader of the gang rudely ordered her to shut up and do as they were told. Then, without blinking an eye, he cruelly kicked her in the stomach, claiming that she and her kind were alive here only by the bandits' mercy. After that, the men began to kick the girl, who was doubled over in pain, mercilessly, shouting that she was in no condition to give anything, so she had to immediately give everything she had. The little girl, choking with tears, tried in vain to cover her head with her hands and protect herself from the blows raining down from all sides, helplessly calling for someone to help. Despite her desperate pleas, the homeless man, whose makeshift hut Ainz and Sophia were just passing by, only huddled more quickly into his rags. The little girl managed to catch a glimpse of the man, who merely adjusted his dirty hat and demonstratively turned away, pretending not to notice anything. Sophia looked at this disgusting sight with a heavy heart, while the main character stood a little further away, looking in the same direction with stony indifference. Then the girl could not stand it any longer and rushed to help, decisively declaring that she could no longer calmly watch this barbarity. She ran up to the group angrily and yelled at the big guys to leave the child alone immediately. The bandits turned around in surprise and stopped, and the leader mockingly asked who she was, suggesting that she might be a relative. The man angrily advised her to mind her own business if she didn't want any trouble. Sophia confirmed that she was not related to the girl in any way, but she was angrily indignant at how they could beat a defenseless child so cruelly, since they could easily kill her with their beatings. The leader only smirked cynically in response, saying that she clearly did not understand their ways, since they were only charging a legal fee for protecting these scum. The man waved his hands for emphasis and began to lay out the harsh truth of their area: no money, no patronage. He explained that all these people were living there illegally, polluting the city, and if the government found out about them, they would all be thrown into prison. So, he said, their crew was showing real mercy, because they were charging a small fee for their silence and protection. With the words, "That's it," the leader again kicked the girl hard in the stomach. When she flew away from the pain, the little girl could not hold on, and a small metal medallion on a chain fell from her weakened hands, clinging onto the cobblestones. One of the henchmen immediately bent down and picked up the decoration. He said that now they had it, to which the leader, getting ready to leave, only chuckled with satisfaction and reminded them that his brother was already waiting for them on another matter. At that moment, Sophia, unable to restrain herself, tried to stop them with a scream. She instinctively reached for the sword, which was not on her belt. Suddenly, a calm voice came from behind, asking the girl not to do anything stupid. When Sophia turned around, Ainz was standing behind her. With disdain, he glanced at the boy's missing hand and sarcastically asked if he was her friend, saying that he was lucky. The protagonist stepped forward, standing in front of the girl, and watched the retreating bandits, one of whom was still clutching the medallion in his fist. The guy looked at them phlegmatically, while Sophia could not utter a word. Then she asked indignantly if they were really just going to let these scoundrels go. He turned around and replied that he didn't see any problem with that. Then his girlfriend blurted out with great excitement that the magician himself had witnessed all this cruelty, so simply letting the bandits go with the loot was wrong. As the little girl lay motionless on the ground, Ainz calmly confirmed that the scene was indeed cruel. Sophia was shocked by this reaction, asking why they couldn't help this girl back then. The girl still lay motionless. Meanwhile, the protagonist asked if Sophia really wanted to help her, to which she hotly replied that, of course, yes, asking if the gentleman himself had not felt the same. The young man, with icy calm, replied that he had no desire to interfere and help, as he saw no point in it. His girlfriend was literally dumbfounded by such a cynical statement. The guy continued, asking her a counter-question: why should they help this particular girl when there are plenty of other people around in these very slums who are in exactly the same or even worse situations? The girl tried to object, but her voice trembled. The mage decided that since they had already interfered with this, he would heal her wounds, making it clear that at least she would wake up without pain. To this end, he summoned a black vial. He poured a few drops of the contents into her mouth. She came to with a wheeze and a groan. The pain subsided. Ainz turned around and began to leave with his escort without looking back. The little one, with difficulty rising on her elbows, thanked them in a weak voice for their help. But seeing that they were moving away, she desperately asked them to wait with tears in her eyes. Still on the ground, she begged them to help her get the pendant back, because it was the only keepsake from her dead mother, and these bandits already had enough treasures. The girl, hearing this, immediately turned around. But the main character, looking at Sophia, commanded her not to interfere and to follow him. The young man, looking at the little girl with a cold, appraising gaze, declared that they could not help her in this matter, and dryly advised her to turn to someone else with this request. His girlfriend peered intently into the child's face. The girl's eyes filled with tears of surprise. The boy asked her why she didn't try to get her property back herself. The girl, stumbling and sobbing, began to explain, but the magician abruptly interrupted her and finished the sentence himself, stating that it was impossible for her to do it alone. After that, he asked the key question: why then should they risk their lives for her sake, getting involved in a conflict with dangerous bandits? Ainz sternly pointed out to her that even if they miraculously managed to get the jewelry back, had the little girl thought about what would happen to her and the pendant after they left? The protagonist calmly continued, making it clear that after they left, someone would easily take this trinket from her again and all their help would be in vain. Then Sophia suddenly remembered with excitement that Boylet, whom the master had once helped in the past, despite his position. The magician, without changing his tone, answered that Lit was different. He was burning with the desire to change his life. He craved power, and not just pity. The young man gave the child a cold look and declared that this girl had no desire to change anything, and that he was not so kind as to thoughtlessly help ordinary rats. Biting her lip in tension, the girl had a flash of thought that this time, Ainz had clearly gone too far. The little girl, hearing these words, began to burst into bitter tears, trying to prove that she also wanted to change her life if she was given a chance. Immediately after she shouted these words, she fell to the ground again with loud, inconsolable sobs. Then the main character suddenly showed interest, remembering the treasure mentioned by the bandits, which the girl had spoken about earlier, which only caused deep disappointment in Sophia, who was standing behind him. Suddenly, the girl had the idea that it could be a relic. The magician did not know what it was. Then his girlfriend enthusiastically explained that these were objects, such as a sword, a pendant, or a book, that could create magic. Such things were usually found on royalty or famous heroes. After this, the young man asked Sophia if she had any records about this. She readily answered that of course she did. The girl was sure that there would be information about famous original books or the remains of saints. Ainz paid special attention to the words about the remains of the saints, vaguely remembering that he had heard about them somewhere before. His escort, smiling broadly at his interest, answered in the affirmative, saying that in their territory only 2 people had been recognized as saints. Sophia continued her story, revealing that these saints were commonly known as Mr. Evan and Mrs. Seeley. Suddenly, she stopped abruptly in mid-sentence. Having finished the last syllable, ka, having received the full name Silica, the girl suddenly realized with horror what she had just done. Here she became embarrassed with excitement and instinctively covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes widened with fear. Ainz, fixing his piercing gaze on her with his multicolored eyes, asked their names again, demanding confirmation. Sophia remained tensely silent, realizing that she had made an unforgivable mistake. The protagonist stood as if thunderstruck, his mind struggling to process the information he had just heard about Silica and Evan's death. As if checking the reality of what he had heard, he asked again if everything was really as Sophia had said. The girl was noticeably upset. Her face reflected the inner heaviness of having to pronounce these words, but she still confirmed their truth. Then the young man asked gloomily how long it had been since they died. Sophia clearly hesitated, her gaze darting around, revealing her inner turmoil and reluctance to voice the next shocking fact. Then the magician, with an expression of growing concern on his face, insistently demanded a clear answer from her. The girl, completely agitated, in a state of confusion, began to tell the whole bitter truth. It turned out that these saints had died 2,000 years ago. This news left the guy stunned. He froze with a dull, expressionless face, mentally going over and rethinking these unthinkable numbers. Realization flashed through his multicolored eyes, replacing the shock with something else. Then the main character suddenly began to shake with uncontrollable, almost hysterical laughter. This sudden, inadequate reaction genuinely frightened Sophia, who was standing in front of him. In front of the girl, who folded her arms anxiously on her chest, the young man laughed, because now everything became clear to him. He repeated loudly, about 2,000 years. Remembering the beautiful buildings, the magician finally understood why everything had changed so much. New fashion for ties and bow ties. A megaphone that amplifies sound in the hands of a man taking an exam. However, now that the truth had finally been revealed, it had given rise to even more questions for the boy. He was puzzled as to why this had happened, assuming that time was distorted in that forest. Ainz argued with himself, coming to the conclusion that he had been bewitched, but he lacked answers to the questions of who it was and when. Tears flowed from the protagonist's eyes as he continued to think about the whole situation, remembering that only he could know about this place. Then Sophia excitedly asked him for forgiveness. She made it clear that she thought it would upset the young man, so she wanted to tell him when he was ready. The guy asked his friend again with a happy smile and tears in his eyes. He waved his only hand, happily stating that this changed everything, and the world became so colorful. Ainz continued to talk about his desire to comprehend all this magic, saying that he simply had to obtain it. The girl behind him watched in shock at this reaction. She was horrified, not understanding why the gentleman was happy. At that moment, the girl behind him turned to the magician, telling him that her mother was an outstanding sorceress. The little girl, her face hanging in despair and continuing to sit on the pavement, said that she only had memories left, but if she had magic, she would be able to, but she hesitated. The main character, continuing to keep his hand raised, looked at the girl with interest. Then the magician turned to her and asked her name. The little girl was taken aback and realized that he was addressing her. The girl named herself Shiala. Then the young man turned to the sitting baby, saying that he could give her the necessary knowledge, which surprised the little girl. While Sophia watched the boy with interest, he swore by his name Ainz Sylvester that he would fulfill his promise on one condition. To Shiala's confusion, he only asked her to answer a few questions. The protagonist asked what she was going to do once she got magic, and received an excited answer from the girl about returning her mother's keepsake pendant. After that, Ainz asked if she was just planning to return it, to which the little girl said more hesitantly that she would also make them apologize. The guy disappointedly asked if that was all, to which Shiala, looking down, added that she wanted them to suffer just like she did. At that moment, the magician's eye glowed white, and with a sinister grin he said, "Will she tell me directly now, because the little girl understands everything perfectly well?" The girl shrank under this gaze and darkened. She then stated with seriousness that she wanted to take their lives. Ainz was satisfied with this, and decided to grant Shiala the power she desired. Here Sophia intervened in the dialogue, shouting to the gentleman to think again, but the main character stopped her with a gesture. With a piercing look of contempt, the young man turned and looked at the girl and commanded her imperiously not to disturb him while he was working, specifying that he would not repeat this twice. This behavior frightened her. Sophia fell to her knees behind the boy, loudly asking for forgiveness. After that, he announced that Shiala should continue, asking what she would do when she defeated her offenders. The girl replied that she would leave these slums. The magician asked her again, making it clear that when she became strong, everything would cling to her. He asked what she was going to do in that case. Then the girl, looking down and becoming gloomy, stammered that she would help them. Ainz asked why she would help them when they didn't even think about taking care of her. Behind them, the other vagabonds who lived in this area, who had previously ignored the fact that the little girl was in trouble, were watching this scene. This made Shiala think. After which the protagonist looked at her piercingly, asking what these people did when her mother was fading. Such a reminder was like a knife cut into the girl. The girl recalled with despair that the slum dwellers constantly turned to her mother for help, and she never refused them. Shiala had unpleasant memories of shaking over the person closest to her, frozen in bed. She mentally noted that despite her mother's kindness, people had abandoned her at the most necessary moment for a woman. Closing his lips, the protagonist asked if the girl wanted to remain a small rat whose life was worth nothing. The little girl resolutely objected. Meanwhile, some thought about this gentleman had occurred to her. Shiala thought he could see right through her heart. Then the young man turned to her, bringing her to the conclusion of why she needed magic. At this time, to the surprise of those present, those people returned to this place, surprised that Sophia was still here. They were already without their leader. The impudent thugs laughed and called the magician a lucky brat who managed to find such a beauty, and one of them even suggested taking his life and having fun with the girl. They, to the obvious displeasure of Sophia, who regretted the lack of a sword, began to argue about which of them would be first. Then Ainz raised his crutch. And then he slammed it noisily onto the ground. There was an immediate reaction, and the bandits seemed to be covered in ice, which restricted their movements. Entangled in icy peaks like vines, they groaned in fear under their weight. Under the girls' astonished gazes, the boys crumbled into thousands of tiny crystals. All that was left of one of them was a silent cloak with blackness where the face should have been. This sight frightened Sophia. After this, the main character continued. The magician with the shining white eye demanded an answer from Shiala. Then the girl, standing up, resolutely declared that she would definitely destroy this place and the people who used and abandoned her mother. Like a devil, the young man asked what the baby's mother would like. Shiala clarified that she was the only one who wanted to kill all the rats that approached them. The girl confidently shouted that she had no doubt that her mother would want her daughter to put aside her anger and leave this place, but the little girl was not going to back down until she took their lives. Then the boy said that they were done. He activated the spell, Divine Hand. Ainz Sylvester moved his hand toward Shiala, and then, touching her head, said that according to their agreement, he would grant her the power she so desired. When he finished speaking, the girl felt something unprecedented, and her eyes widened in surprise. The baby's dress flew up with force as Sophia stood timidly behind, her head bowed. Soon the young man removed his hand from the sweat-covered baby. Then he asked her if she had gotten what she wanted and asked her to demonstrate the power she wanted so much. Shiala folded her hands to her chest and became gloomy. Then she opened her mouth. After which, the girl with determined calmness clenched her hand into a fist and activated the spell, Will of the Black Flame. A small black flame was born near her chest. She pulled it to the side with a movement. The subdued flame remained close to her hand. Suddenly, Shiala pushed it forward, causing a huge fire. Sophia recoiled in horror. The homeless people who were there began to burn to the ground screaming, their mangled silhouettes visible through the smoke and fire. The girl watched in horror as it happened. Then the gentleman turned to her explaining that they would now deal with the bandits, and she quickly agreed. However, Sophia did not know where to go. At this, Ainz turned to Shiala, assuming that she might know. The girl with a tail of black flame behind her answered firmly that she knew it. In this case, the protagonist asked to take them there, declaring that today they would finish with them forever. The swordmaster recalled the unexpected dodge from Ainz. I remembered how I screamed during this fight. He had a flash of him swinging his two-handed weapon, but the protagonist easily parried the blow with his thin blade. Tarish grimly rethought the challenge he had thrown down to the long-haired cripple. He could literally see his stunned face as his sword, pointed towards his enemy, shattered into many pieces. Returning to those events, he remembered how he stared at his hand in surprise, and could only shout out a shocked what. The face of the defeated, shocked Darius was difficult to describe. The little aristocrat hissed angrily, nervously biting his nail. Tarish thought with fury that there should be no people in the kingdom who possessed divine art, and better than him. Clenching his fists, the man wondered why Ainz was so emotionless and cold, as if a duel with a swordmaster was a game to him. The protagonist at this time indifferently threw away what was left of his blade. The half of the sword clanged to the ground. The long-haired youth looked at it phlegmatically. His opponent was at that moment surprised at his own thought that this servant might not be a knight. After that, in a luxurious estate. Darius ordered Tarish to return to his room while he reported to his father. The man obeyed and headed out. The little aristocrat glanced sideways at the mercenary. He then scolded the departing swordmaster furiously, calling him a complete non-entity and assuming that news had already reached his father, who must have made his son look like a complete idiot. Darius reminded him that they had hired him because he had said he was invincible, asking what they should do now. Tarish listened to the insults in silence. The boy ended by threatening the man that if he wanted to keep his head, he should think carefully about how to fix it, after which he turned around and walked angrily towards his father. The swordmaster silently looked after him. Then the man exhaled tiredly. Sitting down on his bed, he cursed exhaustedly. Tarish thought out loud that he couldn't leave the Sobi family because he still had business here and needed to somehow fix the situation. Then the man remembered what they said, that they saw them in the slums, wondering what they were doing there. After some thought, the swordmaster came to the conclusion that it might be a relic. Tarish didn't know for sure, but they were supposedly sold at a very high price. He decided to get it. Then he cursed and fell tiredly onto the bed, talking about what a hassle it was. The man thought about what if everything worked out. Looking at the ceiling, Tarish wanted to meet his recent opponent once again with his powers and the relic. Recalling the image of the phlegmatic Ainz holding the blade, he ended by saying that if he fought him again, he might be able to achieve his goal. Darius, indignant to the point of tears, ran into the room and furiously asked the mercenary if he knew how to fix everything. Heading towards Tarish, who was sitting at the table, the little aristocrat complained that his father had scolded him, blaming the swordmaster for it. He threatened the man so that he wouldn't think he could get away with it. Then, Tarish seriously stated what he thought about the relic. This switched the boy on. Darius extended his hand because he wanted to see her, but the fighter explained that she was not here and he meant that his friend had found her so he would meet him and tomorrow we would see her. The little aristocrat immediately perked up, coming to the conclusion that if he got his hands on such a treasure, his father would definitely forgive him. Closing the door, Darius glanced at the mercenary with a sly smile, telling him not to think that the boy had forgotten about his failure and that the punishment was only postponed for a while. The door closed behind him and creaked long. Sighing and surprised by the impudence of this boy, Tarish stood up. Soon, going out into the night, the man began to move away from the estate. Now the most important thing for him was to get the relic. The swordmaster walked along the pavement of a deserted city, the darkness of which was dispelled by the light pouring from the windows. The man walked past without even looking at the noisy, illuminated tavern filled with townspeople. He kept walking further and further. Here Tarish found the right house from which voices were heard. Throwing open the door, the swordmaster confidently walked inside. he was greeted as a brother by the men who were there. The man greeted them back and walked over, sitting down in a chair to the cheers of his group, who were happy to see their eldest return. The building itself resembled a bar inside. The guys asked the reasons for his visit. He, crossing his arms, replied that problems had arisen and the boy's mood was completely down. Then Tarish said that he had heard that they had allegedly found some kind of treasure and asked to let him in on the details. Then one of the bandits, spreading his arms, confirmed the rumors and explained that they would take him tomorrow because some nobleman had paid them well. The elder noted their good work with a smile. The same man grimaced and said that they needed to discuss something. Hesitantly, rubbing his palms in excitement, he explained that it was about the reward. The swordmaster assured them that there was nothing to worry about and that she would make them very happy. After which, he announced today's celebration. The boys rejoiced with delight. Then cheerful drunken shouts and laughter were heard from the house. The building was illuminated by the morning. Tarish opened his eyes tiredly. Rubbing the bridge of his nose, the man, surrounded by bottles in his chair, complained about his head. Looking up, the swordmaster saw the others. They sat at the table and looked at the pendant. This was that very relic. Tarish then stood up and walked over to the table, noting that they were drinking too much. The bandit holding the relic wished him a good morning, noting, however, that it was already noon. He raised himself up, allowing the swordmaster to examine the jewel. Taking it in his hands, the elder chuckled, because it looked like an ordinary trinket, which made him doubt its value. The bandit then explained with admiration that he had heard that relics were capable of infinitely creating magical power, unlike magic stones that were mined from monsters. Staring at the pendant seriously, Tarish thought that if this was true, then it would now be clear why magic was thriving in this kingdom. But he had a doubt. Looking into the black haze of the jewel, the swordmaster had a strange feeling, the reason for which he did not know. Yawning, he casually returned the relic, ordering it to be put in the box. He himself went to take a little more nap. Holding the pendant, the bandit asked him if he was really going to sleep, since he had an opportunity to earn some money. The elder asked what he was talking about. After which he explained that there was a girl there, and if she was caught and sold to slave traders they could make good money. Tarish agreed, with the clarification that they should not get caught since they did not need any problems. The bandit said that if they did everything quickly, they would still have time to have fun. Then the elder said that alcohol was forbidden for them in that case. His company laughingly reproached him for his cruelty, laughing and asking how he would order them to work without him. Ainz entered their conversation, saying that it was easy and offering to try coffee. His companions followed him. Sophia suggested that regular coffee would not be enough here, and therefore it was worth making it stronger. The bandit was amazed, not understanding what they were doing here. Tarish also turned around with excitement. Then the swordmaster at the other end of the room stood up and began to loudly express surprise at the arrival of the magician. Ainz recognized him as the servant from yesterday. The youth, frowning seriously, looked at the man and apologized, because today he came as the magician Ainz Sylvester. Drawing his heavy blade with one hand, Tarish furiously wondered why he was a wizard and what the point of their duel was then. The man furiously threatened that he would not get off with a draw today. The protagonist's face twisted. He was truly irritated by the swordmaster. Here Shiala angrily pointed at her mother's pendant. Ainz didn't see it at first, but then he saw the thing. The decoration was in the hands of one of the henchmen, who was clutching this treasure with tension. The pendant swayed rhythmically in his eagerly clenched fists. With a soft smile, Ainz was pleased to see what the relic looked like. He then turned to the girl, telling her to focus on her goal. Shiala prepared for a fight, declaring that she would definitely get him back. One of the bandits, sword in hand, grinned and mockingly asked what she would do to him. The man boldly rushed forward at the uninvited guests at the door, threatening that they would gut them and feed them to the pigs. Then the girl sternly activated the spell, Will of the Black Flame, and a cloud of fire appeared next to her. With her hand, she directed it towards the enemy, who was immediately engulfed in flames. He, coughing and groaning in pain, twitched in convulsions. The bandit was burning alive, screaming hysterically. Tarish and the others were shocked. At this point the house was also already engulfed in flames. People were puzzled as to what it was. Dust rose from the blackened building. And soon, the bandits had grass under their feet, and the house they were in a second ago burned to the ground. However, they themselves were unharmed, and in front of them stood the three of their enemies. The armed guys didn't understand what was happening. The swordmaster watched with tension this spectacle, of which he had unwittingly become a participant. With a pleasant smile, Ainz asked Sophia to help Shiala if they didn't want the girl to die. The main character phlegmatically ordered that the pendant should under no circumstances fall into the hands of the young Avenger, so he asked her to stay nearby. The girl became haggard, not understanding the reasons for this behavior. Ignoring his friend's confusion, the young man turned to the swordmaster, saying that yesterday he had really gotten on his nerves. The magician suggested that he not disturb Shiala and change his place. The fighter raised his head in anger. With a smile, Ainz said that changing the location would help him deal with him personally. The man grinned in response. Tarish said furiously that he would do as he wished. The protagonist looked at his opponent calmly. Sophia was worried about the whole situation, unlike Shiala, who was furiously thirsting for revenge. With their backs to each other, the opponents began to systematically move away from the main battlefield, trying to secure space for maneuver. As the two moved purposefully towards their separate fight, the remaining gang members began to disperse into the surrounding area, swords drawn. Sophia crouched down next to Shiala, her blade raised resolutely nearby, ready to defend herself. The girl, taking up a position behind the little girl, began to explain that she had obtained a weapon and that they would now fight back together. However, her explanation was abruptly interrupted by the little girl herself. At the moment when the men surrounding them began to close the circle, Shiala, with unchildlike firmness, objected, declaring that she intended to deal with these people solely on her own. Two of the attackers had already drawn their blades and were preparing to strike. The little girl calmly confirmed that the right to take their lives belonged only to her. Sophia, turning only halfway towards her, looked at the child with obvious excitement. One of the bandits, grinning maliciously, shouted that they were not afraid of any kind of fire magic, because their good swords were forged from real iron. With these words, he quickly pounced on Shiala, mockingly adding that if she decided to use the flame, she risked getting burned by his steel. However, this self-confidence immediately turned into a fatal mistake. As soon as his weapon approached the girl, a significant part of it instantly fell off without even leaving the slightest scratch on her skin. The attacker, distracted by the pitiful stump that remained of his once formidable sword, completely missed the swift attack of the black as night flame. It, like a living snake, coiled around his armed hand with frightening speed. The little girl, maintaining an icy calm, commented that her magic had the unique property of burning not only metals, but also living flesh without the slightest effort. Meanwhile, the man with a charred and smoking hand was in an inhuman howl of unbearable pain. Covered in a cold sweat, he began to incoherently beg for mercy, looking in horror at how all that was left of his limb were charred bones sticking out of his charred shoulder. At that moment, the girl continued her thought, indifferently noting that this flame copes well with bones, turning them to ash. After which, she cast a piercing glance at him, and added that it burned beautifully in the eyeballs too. At that very moment, tongues of that same black fire shot out of the unfortunate bandit's eye sockets. The man instinctively opened his mouth wide in a silent scream. Then, finding his voice, he screamed, trying in vain to extinguish the flames devouring his face with his one remaining hand, while Shiala just watched his death throes. Sophia, watching this scene, looked deeply frightened and shocked by the cruelty she saw. The rest of the men were not inspired by this spectacle of feats, but on the contrary, they were forced to recoil in horror, their faces distorted with animal fear. The little girl addressed the crowd frozen in horror, stating that she had not originally felt the desire to kill them, but now she felt only satisfaction from her decision to change her mind. With a mad, warmthless gaze, the young Avenger pointed her palm, emitting black flame in their direction, and screamed that they would all be devoured by her all-consuming fire. Meanwhile, at the other end of the field, a completely different duel was unfolding. Ainz, maintaining a slight smile, reminded the swordmaster that they had already crossed blades the day before, and as he remembered well, the opponent had not been able to achieve any significant result. Tarish noted with obvious irritation that the magician, as always, was not averse to chatting. The man held tightly to the idea that by defeating this mysterious young man, he would finally achieve his cherished goal. At this moment, the protagonist, gracefully extending his healthy hand forward, politely apologized for any inconvenience and warned that today's duel would not be limited to swordplay. The young man activated the silent magic, time slowdown. The effect of the spell was instantaneous and stunning, the enemy was literally petrified on the spot. The fighter looked at Ainz with his eyes wide open in horror and incomprehension, unable to move a finger. The mage, slowly approaching, explained the essence of his spell, explaining that it radically dulls the subjective perception of time in the target, adding that, of course, he would prefer to have the power to completely stop time, but this magic, unfortunately, is not available to anyone in this world. Continuing his monologue, the wizard materialized his elegant blade from thin air, and by the time he finished explaining, he was already completely ready to attack. Slowly, tapping the ground with his crutch that served as his leg, Ainz began to approach the frozen Tarish. He wondered if he would even have time to realize that the final blow was approaching. However, the swordmaster, bound by magic, remained absolutely motionless. The youth continued his leisurely movement, inexorably reducing the space between them. After making sure that he wasn't going to die, the guy sighed pityingly. The magician smoothly placed the tip of his blade to Tarish's throat and asked with feigned curiosity if that was all. However, at this critical moment, Tarish's body suddenly shuddered. The fighter, cursing through clenched teeth, with some incredible effort of will, managed to partially overcome the effect of the magic and regain his ability to move, albeit with great difficulty. Ainz expressed genuine surprise at this unexpected development. Raising his heavy two-handed weapon, Tarish attacked the enemy furiously, shouting through his hoarse voice that his magic was incredibly annoying. The protagonist, thanks to his agility and foresight, managed to gracefully jump back, dodging the deadly blow. Landing at a safe distance, the mage did not hide his surprise. The swordmaster, standing at a distance, was breathing heavily and intermittently, sweat streaming down his face. The young man noted with sincere admiration that his opponent possessed not only physical strength, but also an exceptionally strong mind. The fighter then activated his signature spell, Divine Power. It enveloped his body in a shining halo, instantly giving his muscles incredible power and speed. Using this surge of strength, the man rushed towards his enemy, sword raised to strike. The guy, maintaining his Olympic calm, quickly assessed the trajectory of the fall and the force of the blow. Then he abruptly, with all his might, struck the ground with his wooden crutch. From this blow, a huge boulder burst out from under his feet with a roar, which, at the will of the magician, rushed straight at the flying Tarish. The swordmaster, noticing the obstacle, furiously cut it in half with his blade, angrily shouting that his opponent clearly underestimated him, since he dared to use such primitive, third-rate magic against him. Then the wizard, demonstratively yawning, again hit the ground with his crutch. This gesture was immediately followed by a much larger attack. Dozens of large, pointed stone blocks rose from the ground, came to life at the wave of the magician's hand and rushed at Tarish from all sides. With loud grunts and furious cries, the fighter desperately spun his two-handed sword, cutting one rock after another, stone chips flying in all directions. With great effort, the man chopped the last, largest boulder. And then, without taking a breath and continuing to scold the magician for his insidious tricks, he responded with a furious counterattack, trying to get to the elusive enemy. However, Ainz, with his characteristic grace, once again easily dodged the deadly blade and simply snapped his fingers. Then, from the clear sky, like falling comets, dozens of bright incandescent crystalline flashes rushed towards the rather tired Tarish, leaving behind glowing trails. The main character at this time easily jumped even further back, observing the effect. Tarish looked up at the sky with growing concern, realizing the scale of the new threat. Shouting a battle cry at the limit of his physical capabilities, he began to rapidly cut the flying crystals one after another. However, some of the projectiles still flew past his blade, leaving deep scratches on his muscular arms and shoulders. The mage, meanwhile, without losing a second, was already calling for the next, even more complex attack. The young man phlegmatically extended his hand to the side and pulled out another blade from the glowing parallelepiped that appeared in the air. Gritting his teeth in pain and rage, the fighter croaked as he revealed the true reason for his confidence. He believed that the spell Divine Power was the perfect tool to counter any mage, which he loudly and defiantly announced to his opponent. After that, reactivating the remnants of the Divine Power, he made a powerful leap towards Ainz, his sword charged with the energy of the spell. But the young man, having predicted the movement, managed to parry the blow. The swordmaster froze for a moment, clearly surprised that his crushing blow had been so easily taken and deflected. The youth's opponent was thrown away from the point of impact, while Ainz smoothly turned around, ready to continue the fight, his new blade pointed towards Tarish. He cursed, clutching his wounded hand. At that moment, the protagonist was thinking with genuine admiration that this so-called divine power was clearly an unusual magic, and that there must undoubtedly be other, no less interesting, combat spells of this kind in the Empire. With a mad, purely research interest and a mysterious smile, the guy thought that he definitely wanted to know and study them all, and at that very moment, he activated the spell. This time, it was the spell Shadow Actor. It allowed Ainz to make a rapid spin and deliver a completely unexpected blow to the enemy. In the process of movement, another phantom hand appeared as if from the shadow, holding a second sword, which, in sync with the main blade, aimed at the enemy. The Swordmaster was truly shocked to recognize this movement as the traits of a top-level divine art known as the Three Movements. Defending himself furiously with his heavy weapon, the fighter managed to cut the mage's ghostly second blade, but his face was distorted with astonishment and anger. He demanded to know how the boy knew such complex and secret techniques of true fencing, and who could be his teacher. The man furiously demanded who had taught him this damn technique. In the heat of anger and confusion, he let his guard down for a moment, and the boy's sword slashed across his torso, leaving a deep, bleeding wound. Blood gushed from a deep wound on his leg and a cut on his waist, causing Tarish to retreat with a painful groan, although he miraculously managed to stay on his feet. While the Swordmaster was having trouble inspecting the damage done to him, Ainz smoothly recalled his material sword back to the pocket dimension. Now the protagonist finally understood that the Imperials called such advanced combat techniques divine arts. As usual, with a show of casualness, Ainz casually slammed his wooden crutch onto the ground. A long, straight sword instantly materialized in front of him, its tip landing on the ground with a dull thud, standing upright like a monument. The fighter, at this time, overcoming the pain, still managed to take a defensive stance. The young man's opponent could not hide his shock at the fact that, in addition to incredibly powerful magic, this mysterious young man also possessed such high forms of divine art that it left him completely bewildered about his true nature and origin. Tarish, with despair and bitterness in his voice, asked how Ainz managed to comprehend divine techniques, and why, despite all his efforts, he still could not master them. The protagonist only smiled silently in response, thinking about the situation to himself. The Empire despises magic, and the emphasis is placed only on honing the skill of wielding a blade. The Swordmaster laughed sadly, silently, and with a sad, lost smile said that it turns out that even magicians are able to use divine arts, unlike him, but he did not have time to finish his bitter thought. Trembling with pain, fatigue, and the realization of defeat, the man told that it was precisely the inability to master the divine art that once prevented him from taking the life of a scoundrel, which forced him to leave the Empire and come here, hoping to learn magic. But here, too, he failed. Magic turned out to be beyond his control, and all that was left for him was to continue to walk the only familiar path of the sword. Falling to his knees before the magician, Tarish openly admitted his defeat, making it clear that he was clearly no match for such a powerful opponent, and that further resistance was pointless. The young man, keeping his slight smile, stated that the Swordmaster, apparently, had serious problems and politely asked what his name was. Tarish, with a bitter, hopeless grin, introduced himself, adding that he would hardly remember his name. Then the boy made it clear that he was not just a wizard, but a sorcerer named Ainz Sylvester. But the Swordmaster was already disgusted by any chatter, he only asked to end it quickly. The young man, however, was extremely interested in something, so he had absolutely no desire to kill the defeated enemy. The protagonist also noted that he was afraid of starting to doubt his own humanity, which caused only a bitter smile from the exhausted man. Humanity, in his opinion, was a concept completely alien to this sorcerer. At that moment, Ainz removed the magic seal. And he activated the spell, Eye of the Damned. Instantly, his right eye was swallowed by blackness, with a small white in the middle. Ainz directed that terrifying gaze straight into the soul of the defeated warrior. Tarish was overcome with fear at the sight of this anomaly. Meanwhile, the youth unnaturally inclined his head towards the man sitting on his knees, noting something to himself with intense, almost predatory interest. The Swordmaster, depressed and disoriented, did not understand at all what he was doing, but he still did not like it. After this brief but intense contact, the protagonist pointed his newly materialized blade towards the enemy and commanded him to raise his sword and prepare to answer questions. As if hypnotized, the fighter obediently grabbed the hilt of his weapon and stood up, adopting a waiting stance. Seeing his submission, the youth immediately activated the silent magic Mirror Reflection. In front of the stunned Tarish, not one but 3 identical silhouettes of Ainz appeared, standing in combat stances. He bit his lip until it bled, shocked to the depths of his soul, recognizing in this the legendary divine technique, True Triple Step. Then, with a nervous, almost hysterical laugh, he decided that the main character was simply cruelly mocking him. The central one of the 3 Ainz clearly stated that if a man truly desired to know the hidden secrets of the divine arts, then he would have to pay for this knowledge with honest answers to the questions asked. After which, all 3 illusory opponents simultaneously attacked the Swordmaster, proclaiming that right now they would grant him the very knowledge he needed. Tarish parried the blow of one of them with a deafening clang. Fiercely defending himself with his heavy two-handed weapon from the phantom attacks, the fighter mentally admitted that he was not able to defeat this opponent. But in this hopeless battle, there was some irrational urge that forced him to continue fighting. Tarish, with delighted, wild excitement, raised his blade for another blow, exclaiming how much fun it was. At this point, Sophia, acting almost automatically, still kept her sword at the ready. Although she never used it, she looked at what was happening in front of her with horror and disgust. Before her stood the young avenger Shiala, with a black flame burning in her hand. The charred, smoking remains of bandits lay all around. The burnt skull of one of them, with its grin absurdly frozen in an eternal scream, was unceremoniously smashed by Shiala's little foot, which indifferently stepped over it without even looking down. While the last bodies of his comrades slowly burned out, only 2 bandits remained alive, pushed further away from the fire. They trembled and asked her not to come closer. Meanwhile, the girl calmly moved forward, stepping right on the smoldering remains of their former comrades, not paying attention to the crunch of coals under her feet. With mad eyes, completely blackened like coals, she said in a monotonous voice that only they remained, the last ones. The 2 lucky ones were shaking and one of them was convulsing with sobs. The man continued to hold the relic all this time. Here, with a sudden icy horror, Sophia remembered the strict instructions of Lord Ainz that her main task was to be close to Shiala and in no case allow the girl to get her hands on this ill-fated pendant. Shiala pointed her hand towards the enemy. He, with tears in his eyes, asked her to spare him, asked her to stop. The girl indifferently asked if she should really spare them. She raised her hand up, black smoke came from it, which materialized and pierced the man's body. She asked about whether these people had spared her when she begged for it. At the same time, Sophia stood behind her and silently watched this. Part of the man's body turned black. He began to tear his throat with his nails and scratch his skin until it bled. A few moments later, the man died. His neck was left with long stripes from his nails, and he fell to the ground, his entire body turning black. Even the ground beneath him was stained. His comrade was shocked by this. He was holding a sword in his hands. Shiala said that there was only one enemy left. The man stood and shook, while his sword was pointed towards the girl. After that, he knelt down, and in his hand he held out a very interesting object. The man was kneeling in front of Shiala, holding out the pendant with a long cord to her with both hands. The girl looked at it all indifferently, her face showing no emotion. Suddenly, she moved her hand to the side. The black energy became even more. The man continued to kneel in front of her, but there was a feeling that he had absorbed all this energy into himself, and his body seemed to turn into stone. Shiala watched as the man turned into a solid black block. His head seemed to be connected to his hands, but he continued to hold the object in his palms. She walked up to him and then reached her hand out to him. Then Sophia came up to her and told her to stop. She looked very determined and had a sword in her hand. Shiala hadn't even touched the object yet. She was shocked that the girl was telling her something. Sophia told her not to touch the pendant. She was very serious and persistent in her decision, to which Shiala asked her why she couldn't take it. The girl just wanted to answer her question when the blonde asked her if she had really decided to stand in her way. She asked if she was really her enemy too. Sophia realized that there was no point in discussing anything here, because they did not understand each other. She did not answer, only squeezed her sword tighter and then pointed it slightly towards her friend. She told Shiala that she didn't want to kill her, to which the girl smirked and asked her if she really thought she could do it. Shiala turned away from her and still said with a smile that even if she became her enemy, she would simply burn her. Sophia realized that the girl was going to take the pendant in her hands, to which Shiala decided to calm her down and replied that she would not die as long as the black flame protected her, after which she took the object in her hand. However, everything clearly did not go according to plan. When the girl took the pendant in her hands, a very strong glow came from it, which should not be there. She was shocked by this. At first her eyes widened in shock, then she seemed to realize. Tears welled up in her eyes and she said that it had finally happened. After that, she began to cry loudly. Tears were streaming down her face. She continued to stand and look at the pendant. It was obvious that the life was slowly draining from her eyes. Sophia rushed to her to stop her. Shiala stood motionless. Suddenly, a huge hand appeared in the sky. Its owner said that the latter had broken the law of this world, after which it placed a seal on the girl and sentenced her. Then, the same sentence was carried out. Shiala continued to stand in front of the man, holding the pendant in her hands. At that moment, the hand approached her, and something sharp appeared from it, like a spear, which pierced her through. She did not expect this. Sophia realized that something was happening. She called the girl by name, but she didn't react at all, and then she started falling to the ground. The girl ran up to the blonde. She managed to catch her at the last moment, after which she asked what was happening to her. At that moment, Shiala's hand fell limply. She stopped showing signs of life. Sophia held her friend's body tightly to her, asking why all this had happened, why she had done this. The attacked man was still next to them, and Sophia's sword lay next to them. At that moment, the protagonist appeared. He apologized to them for being a little late. He realized that something had happened. Sophia asked him for forgiveness. At the same time, she continued to hold Shiala in her arms. Ainz, looking at this picture and the pendant in the girl's hands, said that it was not her fault. Sooner or later it would have happened. He said that the only ones protected from punishment are sorcerers. Shiala was overtaken by the divine seal. He picked up the pendant to look at it. Sophia asked him if he knew this would happen. He said no, but explained that the blonde was the first to master the black flame. The source of magic is a person's sincere desire. But until now, no one has shown such a strong desire to master the magic of the black flame. It seems that the price for such powerful magic is also high. He has not yet fully mastered this sorcery. The protagonist said that this is why Shiala paid such a high price. This was to be expected. Sophia was a little shocked by his words. She did not even find an answer. And suddenly something dawned on her. She raised her head and addressed the main character by name. There were tears in her eyes. Shiala seemed to disintegrate into particles that flew into the sky. Ainz said that people who violated the laws of the universe cannot even be mourned after death. Their bodies turn into fragments of light that dissolve in space. The main character said that if you think about it, it's quite a good death. At that moment, Sophia tried to touch one of them because they looked unusual. Ainz looked at Shiala with a sad smile on his face and said that along with the light, all the bad memories would go away. The protagonist turned to the blonde and said that her end was definitely worthy of her life. She should sleep peacefully. He hoped that she would be happy in the next life. Shiala finally fell apart into these fragments and disappeared. Ainz followed the last of them with his gaze. After that, he lowered his head, looked at Sophia and said that it was time for them to return. It was obvious that he was sad about what was happening. The girl listened to his words, after which she stood up. They looked into each other's eyes without saying a word. Then Sophia happily said that they hadn't found a school of magic where children were taught, after which she suggested that he continue searching tomorrow. He smiled at her, but didn't answer. Sophia said that today was a stressful day. He agreed with her. She asked if that girl was involved in that fire, to which he replied that it was true, she was not to blame. Then the girl noticed something. She turned to the protagonist and tried to tell him what she saw, to which he replied that this pendant was given to him by Shiala, a girl from the slums. Sophia was surprised by these words. She asked if he really remembered her name, after which he said that she was such a charming girl, to which Ainz asked her who she thought he was and added that he could remember people's names. The girl asked the main character if he was tired, to which he, without turning his head, answered positively and said that he was very tired. Sophia said that they still had time, after which she suggested that they take a little walk before dinner, to which he replied that she should learn to cook, since she should help too. She got angry. Here, the main character looked away. It was obvious that he was nervous. At that moment, he said that he forgot someone. The girl in shock asked him again what he meant. It turned out that he had forgotten about his rival Tarish. He was lying unconscious on the ground. His sword was lying next to him. A new day had come. At this time, the action took place in the castle. Lislot was sitting and eating. She was talking about how it had been so noisy since the morning, why they couldn't calm down. The maid said that there was a fire in the shopping district yesterday. Tarish, Darius's servant, was inspecting the slums, but they were in ruins. The girl said that it was clearly not an accident. To cause such a powerful flame is difficult. The maid said that witnesses also claimed to have seen black flames. She wondered to herself if her mistress had been eating steaks and drinking wine since early morning. The girl also asked who could have such destructive power, after which she added that it was clear that this magician was hiding somewhere in the capital. Lislot replied that she understood everything. At this time, two men were moving along the corridor of the castle. One asked why they had arrived so late, after which he said that they needed to go faster. Lislot said that if it really was a black flame, then it was an unusual case, to which the maid asked what she meant. At the same time, she watched as her mistress refilled the glass. Mrs. Lislot said that most likely it was a sorcerer. Ordinary magicians cannot compare with him. And then, Lislot turned her gaze to her service and asked in a serious tone what they knew about Brandy's affairs. To which the maid replied that he would go to the royal palace in the afternoon, perhaps to give the holy relic. Lieslot was thinking about something of her own. At that moment, the door to her room opened. The maid immediately turned around to ask who had come and to add that she was busy at the moment, but she did not have time to finish her sentence. The king appeared at the threshold of the room. He asked for forgiveness and said that he would like to speak with the lady. At the same time, there was a small smile on his face, which gave his appearance a little softness. The maid was shocked by the person who appeared on their doorstep. She covered her mouth with her hand. It was obvious that she was nervous, after which she asked again whether it was really him, as if she could have imagined it. She was ready to fall to her knees in front of him, but she simply bowed low and said that she was very sorry, to which the man said that everything was fine. He told the maid that she could go free. The girl thanked him for this and then left the room. At that moment, Lieslot turned to the young man and asked what was the matter, why he was embarrassed. She offered to teach him how to treat a woman properly, to which he replied that he didn't need it, after which he asked her to cover up, to which the girl asked why he was angry. She just wanted his first time to be right. The king said that he would not allow his son's first time to be with such an old woman, to which Lieslot asked him if he really wanted to die. The man said that he was asking permission to ask first. He asked her whether the black flame was not magic, but witchcraft. He looked very serious. Lieslot replied that it was true, but he shouldn't worry. The mage who used that flame was no longer in this world. Both men were shocked, and the younger one asked what she was saying. To which she replied that there are certain restrictions for sorcerers. The black flame is one of them. If a sorcerer breaks this rule, then only death awaits him. The lady said that this sorcerer had already received his punishment, after which she turned to the men and said that he had better sit down, and she asked them to leave her servant Moraine. The girl bowed to them and closed the door. Lieslot said that as far as she knew, Ainz Sama did not possess such magic, and the same applies to his assistant. She said that, in other words, it was a new sorcerer. Although it is rare, it is possible. Surely the main character is also capable of this. Lieslot added that the relic could affect the Black Flame's limitation, and Marquis Kansas decided to bring them the relic. It's clearly not a coincidence. She said that, in other words, Ainz created a new sorcerer, and there is no doubt about it. The king chuckled and said that he understood everything. Lieslot asked him why he didn't just call Ainz and ask him directly, to which he replied that perhaps it wasn't worth it yet, otherwise their captain wouldn't calm down so easily. The king said that since she said that the sorcerer was no longer, there was no need to worry. After that he said that there was one more issue that needed to be resolved between the Sobi and Brandy houses. Lieslot said with a smile that they were at it again, after which she asked what had happened this time. The king said that the main character made Tarish, who served in Sobi's house, his servant. The man scratched his forehead and said that he was nothing but trouble. Lieslot immediately stopped moving a little and asked him if he had really said that the guy had made another his servant. The younger one said that first Sophia said that she was his faithful servant, now Tarish too. The Sobi family is preparing to go to court. The boy said that he didn't understand why the main character made him a servant. The king scratched his head and said that he didn't understand either. Lieslot realized that this was not a good thing. Her whole appearance betrayed the seriousness of the situation. She asked them to be quiet and listen to what she had to say. If they think and remember her words, it doesn't matter who, a commoner or even the whole country. She added that perhaps no one would survive the night. Everyone was shocked by her words. It was unexpected. The king said that he understood everything and then asked how he could explain this to Sobi's family. The girl became angry at that moment. She told the king that if the family did not calm down, they could just shut them up. Then she started writing a letter and said that she hoped he would help her. Lieslot said that she would only leave her signature on paper, and the rest would depend on the man. The king took the paper in his hands, read its contents, and then apologized to her and thanked her for her help. After that, Lieslot remembered her words about killing him, then asked if she could kill him now. At that moment, the man left her room like a ninja. She was surprised by his actions. The girl said that the king was fast for his age. At that moment she heard someone apologizing to her. She immediately called Harold by name. Lieslot asked him to keep an eye on Kirsha. If the guy suddenly fails, then she might accidentally end up in the eye of the storm. Harold said that he understood his task, then headed for the exit and left the room, closing the door behind him. At that moment Moraine returned to the room. Lieslot turned to the latter and asked if she knew about the holy relic, to which the maid replied in the affirmative. She explained that they were often wielded by royalty or heroes, but she had heard that Brandy's relic was a little different. Unlike the magic stones, it was capable of infinitely generating mana. Lieslot asked her if she knew why the relic was capable of such a thing, to which the maid replied in the negative. She suggested that this was possible because in ancient times it had been owned by a great man, or because of the will of higher powers. To which the lady answered negatively. Lieslot said that it is connected with those who could not leave anything behind in this world. After their death, a piece of their soul remains in the world. For example, heroes mired in darkness, or kings greedy as hell, anger, people who have gone mad with blood. Although these things have beautiful names, if you try to look into the essence, they contain only madness and cruelty. The maid was frightened by her words. Lieslot, looking at her, said that he probably succumbed to this madness inside the relic, so she should be careful. Lieslot said that they say that the restrictions of the Black Flame are a ban on shedding tears. Sometime later in the castle. At first it was light all around, the sun was shining, the weather was wonderful, but literally a few moments later the sun was hidden by clouds, it became dark all around. Lieslot continued to sit in the living room, at the table. She looked ahead and thought about one of the relics she often heard, The Beginning, written by Ainz. She wondered if he knew that his book stood above all other relics in the industry. It was said to contain magic so powerful that an ordinary person would either go mad or die just by picking it up. After which, Mrs. Lieslot began to take off all her clothes. The dress gently slid off her shoulders. She was left completely naked. She mentally asked Ainz what he had seen during his journey, what madness continued to haunt him, what ending he wanted to see in this story. These questions haunted her. After that, still naked, it headed towards its bed. Then it sat down carefully on the mattress. Madame Lieslot laid down on the bed, then wrapped her body tightly in a blanket and thought about when her ruler would arrive. The events are transferred a little earlier. The main character and his allies were standing in front of the bed on which Tarish was lying, all bandaged. Two people who were not on the battlefield were surprised that this guy was here. They asked Ainz if he really meant to say that this was the same servant of Darius Subi, to which he replied in the affirmative. The main character said that he wanted him to serve him. Everyone started asking him what he meant. They were hearing about it for the first time, whether he was even in his right mind. Sophia was the most shocked. Ainz said that he had already made a decision. The head of the Brandy family asked if he had told the Subi family about it. The boy replied that he had not yet, but he hoped that the man would help resolve the issue. The main character closed his eyes and told Mr. Kansas that he knew everything about how much time had passed. The man was surprised by this fact. After this, the conversation stopped, and Kansas himself went into his thoughts and thought that everything was clear to him, which meant that he had found out about everything. Ainz said that he was not interested in politics at all. Even if he wanted to use the guy for his own purposes, he didn't care, but he had to understand some things. The main character said that he would not allow anyone to interfere in his affairs. Kansas realized that this was clearly a warning that if you get in his way, he will spare no one. He is an evil man, but in the right doses, even deadly poison can be a cure. The man realized that in this matter, the main thing is not to make mistakes. He said out loud that Mr. Ainz is his guest, so he will try to do something. The protagonist thanked him for this, after which he informed Sophia that she had a new student. The girl replied that the guy had turned his sword against her master. She was very unhappy about this, but she could not disobey. Kansas, looking at this, thought that the sorcerer Ainz Sylvester was using their family as a tool. If they refused him, then he could get rid of them right away. He looked at the main character and the girls arguing among themselves, and thought that this is precisely why they call him the god of evil. After some time, Tarish came to his senses, after which he was dressed in new clothes. The main character said that it turned out well, after which he thanked everyone for their help. The guy asked why they were subjecting him to such humiliation. Mr. Ainz couldn't hold back his laughter, he even had tears in his eyes. He turned to Tarish and said that it didn't suit him at all. Sophia agreed with him and said that it was terrible. However, the main character then changed his mind. He said that everything was fine, it looked great on him, but he couldn't say these words calmly because he was laughing. Tarish asked to choose whether he would laugh or lie brazenly. Then he was rude to Sophia. The girl was shocked by what he said, after which she asked him again about what he was saying, to which the guy angrily replied that she should shut up since she was annoying him. Tarish said that even in his village the people were friendly, after which he said that they got on his nerves. Sophia said that she would tolerate his words but only because of Ainz. The latter simply laughed at the situation. At the same time, in the Sobi family mansion, Darius went to his father's office. The latter called him by name. The father immediately said that he wanted to talk about the servant he had assigned to him. He was trying to remember his name when Darius, stammering, said that his name was Tarish. The man said that this was indeed the name. Although he was the son's servant, he served the entire Sobi family. and then he learns that he is now in the service of the Brandy family. If they had tolerated such insolence, they would never have achieved their current position, so he sends a lawsuit directly to His Majesty. The father showed the paper to his son and asked him to tell him why only the royal decree had been returned to him. The latter asked again in surprise. The man said that the decree said that they had to close all cases regarding Tarish's service. If it had only been the king's signature, he would have challenged this decision. At this time, Darius was shaking with fear. The father also explained that the decree also had Mrs. Lislot's signature. He asked his son if he understood what that meant. He hesitantly replied yes. The man said he didn't understand how some bad guy could steal their service and get away with it. He asked if Darius understood what he was getting at and then ordered him to answer. Darius said that he had tarnished the honor of the Sobi family. At the same time, he was very afraid to answer this question. The father exhaled and said that this was not entirely true. Most likely, the king made this decision under pressure. He could only turn away from the Sobi house under the threat of destroying the kingdom. In other words, he felt such a threat from the Brandy family. The man went to the window to close the curtains. He asked his son what this threat was, what kind of power Brandy's house had managed to obtain. The father stood by the window, still not turning to face his son. He said that this was probably connected with Tarish. Darius asked about the possibility of a holy relic, to which the man replied that the relic was nothing more than a trinket, just a pathetic excuse from the king. It was definitely connected to Tarish. He knew everything. The man started talking about Brandy having Rika, or rather he corrected himself and said that he could rather be called a servant. The father turned his gaze to his son and said that his name was Ainz, after which he asked if that was his name. Darius flinched at his words. The man said that the main character was so strong that he even dared to raise his hand against Mrs. Lislot. He turned to his son and said that he was the first to see his strength. Father set fire to that decree regarding their servant Tarish and said that this Ainz serves the Brandy family. He underestimated them. The head of the house Sobi said that the main character lured their servant. He saw his potential. At these words, Darius began to get angry. Father said that this turned the fragile balance between the three great families upside down. The letter in his hands turned completely to ashes. Darius became very scared because he felt the atmosphere in the room change. He tried to justify himself to his father. After this, the man walked over to the corner with drinks, picked up one of the bottles, and asked his son if he knew that he had many brothers. Darius answered negatively, after which he explained that his mother had told him something completely different. His father said that it was true. He poured himself a drink and said that all his brothers had lived very short lives, to which the man asked why this happened. At first, Darius didn't answer because he was thinking about his words, after which his eyes widened in shock, his body began to shake slightly, and he said that it was all about the curse. His father started laughing loudly at his suggestion, after which he said that yes, it was a damn curse. After that, the man approached the wall where the photographs of people were located. He said that for the entire Sobi family, the concept of a short life does not exist. At the same time, the man's face changed, and his pupils became completely black. Darius did not understand what was happening. He became very scared. His whole body began to tremble, causing him to fall to the floor. The man turned away from him. The father calmly took a sip from his glass, then looked at the photographs and laughed. The eyes of the people in the photographs seemed to have gone crazy. Darius was truly scared. He sat on the ground, tears streaming from his eyes. The man called him by name and began to tell him about the time when his mother was pregnant. The father leaned very close to him and then asked him if he really thought the child had died because of the Sobi family's curse. It was as if there were a bunch of eyeballs behind him. At this time, in the Brandy family mansion, Kansas told Ainz that the Tarish case would be closed. He thought to himself that thank God he managed to resolve everything peacefully. The protagonist smiled at him and said that he was grateful to him. After which, the guy turned to Tarish and told him to be grateful. He lived so well only thanks to him. To which the latter answered him that he was happy with the little crumbs he received from Sobi's family. Sophia was angry. Kansas told Ainz that the exam results would be announced soon, and then asked if he could help Rika a little more, asking him to continue accompanying her as a servant. To which the main character thought, remembered past events, and said that, as far as he could judge from the exam, she did not need his help at all. Ainz said that he would be able to make a decision only after he learned what they teach there. Rika said that the food in the academy cafeteria was very tasty. The protagonist immediately perked up and asked if that was really true. To which Kansas responded positively and said that in his student days the food was excellent. He said that it was frequented by the children of aristocrats, so the standards there were very high, all the seats there were literally taken in seconds. The main character's mouth began to drool, he became inspired and said that it was very interesting. It was obvious that he wanted to be there. Ainz said that he wanted to know how ordinary students knew the basics of magic, it would be good to talk to them directly. The only one they found on their walk was Flourished, to which Sophia compared the latter to a stray dog. The protagonist laughed and said that he was looking forward to when they would start to conflict, after which he said that he agreed to accompany Rika to the academy. Kansas said that he was glad to hear it. It was obvious that he sighed in relief. Rika said that she would really be able to boss Ainz around again. At the same time, she smiled slyly. The protagonist began to resent this. Rika laughed. Tarish asked if they were really servants of a servant now, to which Sophia said that he should not be so self-confident, he was just a disciple of a servant's servant. Everyone laughed. At the same time, in another estate, there was a knock on the door, after which the commander said that the person could come in to him. It turned out to be his subordinate, who apologized to him for disturbing him. The man didn't even look up at him, he was busy with papers, filling them out with his own hand. He asked the newcomer what was going on, to which the subordinate said that a letter had arrived from Sophia. The commander immediately perked up, after which he asked again whether it was really from Sophia. He said why she had not written for so long, and then thanked him and let him go. When he reached for the letter, he felt pain in his hand. He said that he had been busy with paperwork all day, it was time for him to take a break. Sophia's detailed report stated that the protagonist had learned the entire truth. The man thought about how it seemed that Ainz had learned everything. And also, the main character began cooperation with Marquis Brandy. The commander was very surprised by this fact. Ainz had always acted distant, he didn't expect him to open up to him so easily. It seemed to have had a great effect on him. The original of The Immortal Witch has led to a wide distribution of copies. The kingdom's magic is developing much faster than the Empire could have imagined. But it seems the protagonist has discovered where several more originals are stored. Marquis Brandy allied himself with Ainz, which opened up many paths for him to develop politically. The balance of power was clearly upset. The commander thought that he was wondering what move the head of the Subi family would make. He hoped that the man was not going to declare war on Lord Ainz. The commander immediately laughed at his thoughts and said that it seemed to him that many events awaited them soon. The royal family and the immortal witch, Lizelot, the unknown darkness of the Subi family. He literally imagined all these people in front of him. And then he introduced the greatest wizard Ainz Sylvester, who had entered into an alliance with the Brandy family. They are now the three greatest powers in the kingdom. The commander thought deeply and came to the conclusion that very soon the kingdom would be overtaken by a real storm. Night had fallen. It seemed as if particles of magical energy were flying above the Sobi family mansion. They were white, like shards of glass. At this time, Darius was sitting at the table. He held his head in his hands and thought about what he should do, while he repeated this question several times in his head. He remembered his father's words that their lives were valuable and he did not want to resort to unnecessary killing, but when his mother was pregnant, he had to do something. The man's face was distorted with strange emotions. He didn't even look like a human. Then he asked if Darius really thought that the child died because of the curse of the Sobi family. The boy began to shake with fear. He folded his hands in front of him and thought that his father was definitely serious. At that moment, a voice came from behind him. An unknown girl asked him if he was cold. She crept up so quietly that he flinched in fear. It was a girl with short dark hair. She was holding a tray and asked if he wanted her to bring him some warm tea. The guy didn't even turn his head. He said that he didn't want to, but eventually he agreed. Darius folded his arms across his chest and haughtily told her not to dare give him something cheap. It had to be something worthy of his person. The girl closed her eyes and said that she would do as he ordered. However, compared to the specialty of the Sobi family, other tea would seem cheap to him. She also said that the guy would probably notice the difference right away. At the same time, she poured tea into a glass. Darius looked at her with an incomprehensible look. At this time he was very nervous. Continuing to pour water, the girl said that it was just water. She confirmed these words to herself. After that, she spread her arms out to the sides, smiled sweetly, and said that even simple water could be special in this family. In her left hand, she held a glass of tea. Darius was a little hesitant at first. He looked at the glass carefully, then tipped the contents into himself, and then swallowed it. After that, he exhaled and began to talk. He looked seriously at his interlocutor and asked what she needed. After which he added that if she had been invited, then the matter must be serious. The girl said that she had heard that the guy had recently moved to another family. At the same time, she had a slight smile on her face. Darius was shocked that she knew this fact. He jerked in surprise, then hesitated and said that she was right. The whole thing was that he didn't like the current situation. The guy lowered his head, then started rubbing his face with his hand and said that because of what was happening, his father hated him. To which the girl replied that he was wrong. Darius raised his head sharply, then stared at his interlocutor with an incredulous look and asked what she meant. The girl asked him if the guy really wanted to leave such a powerful family for no reason. She said that they should find out what those reasons were and they could easily bring him back. Darius happily said that she was right. It wasn't his mistake, it was all Tarish's fault. It was obvious that a weight had been lifted from the guy's shoulders. The girl confirmed his words. She said that he was right, after which she said that they would figure out the reason for Tarish's betrayal and then he would have no choice but to return. The stranger began to say that from this moment everything would change, to which Darius stared at her in shock while slightly flinching from her tone. The guy jumped to his feet, leaned one hand on the table, clenched the other into a fist, and decisively said that now they could fix everything. The girl just looked at him silently. Then Darius said what he understood, after which he asked if she really wanted to cooperate, and also inquired about what benefit she would get from this, what she wanted to achieve. To which the girl looked at him joyfully. There was a smile on her face. She exclaimed that she did not think that he was so perceptive. Darius seemed to puff out his chest. He proudly said that it was so, after which he told her to do what she wanted, to which the stranger thanked him with all her heart. The guy said that he hoped she wouldn't let him down. Then he remembered something and said by the way that he never heard her name. She continued to smile at him. After his question, she lowered her gaze slightly, her pupils seemed to darken. Then she stood up and asked him for permission to introduce herself, placing her right hand on her chest. The girl bowed her head before him and said that she was one of the rising stars, the great sorceress, Rubermer. Sometime later, in the Brandy family mansion, Tarish and Sophia clashed in a duel. They were serious and on edge, giving it their all as if it was their last fight. Time after time their swords clashed, but they fought back strongly. Not once did either of them strike their opponent, each time they managed to block and parry the blow. The protagonist stood aside and watched their battle. Judging by his face, he liked what he saw very much. Behind him, Reika was sitting at a table, a mug of drink in front of her, and her maid was standing next to her. Everyone was watching the fight. After a few moments, the fight stopped. Sophia's hand was shaking badly. She said that this was to be expected from the King of the Sword. The blows were precise and fast. It was clear that she respected her opponent, although she was very exhausted because of him. To which Tarish, also tired like the girl, said that he had never met a more skilled swordsman in the entire kingdom, and he kept his sword at the ready, which indicated that the duel would definitely continue. After these words, Sophia decisively and a little threateningly said that this is why she is Ainz-Sama's right hand, and then again rushed into battle with the guy. Shouting that she would not yield to anyone, she began to strike him with blow after blow, so much so that Tarish did not always have time to parry the attack. He cursed out loud and said that she was crazy. The main character looked at them with a smile and thought that even though they continued to quarrel, it looked like they had finally become friends. At that moment, Sophia called out his name and said that she understood that he had not finished his conversation with Tarish yet, but she wanted to ask him when he would do so. Ainz did not understand what she was talking about at first. Then the girl glared at him very angrily and asked if he wanted to put him in her place. The main character immediately began to deny it and answered her question in the negative. Ainz explained with a smile on his face that the boy's magical abilities were directly related to his level. This answer surprised both Sophia and Tarish himself. The protagonist explained that, unlike the system they were used to, Tarish was developing according to the Empire's rank system. Both were listening to him attentively at that moment. Ainz's face became a little more focused. He said that it was very difficult for the guy to understand the principles of magic. Tarish agreed with his words and said that although they were related to divine arts, he still had not fully understood them. It was obvious that he was dissatisfied with this fact. The protagonist explained that there is a significant difference between magic and fencing. Unlike the swordsmen, the mages remain in the rear. Sophia explained that these are basic tactics. Swordsmen fight on the front lines while mages cover them from all sides. Then the main hero asked them what would happen if swordsmen could use magic. At that moment, the magic clot he needed had already formed in his hand. After which, Ainz suddenly raised his hand in front of him, and a rather strong burst of magic shot out from it, which stretched past the girl. Sophia looked at this in shock and wondered if he could really do it with just one snap of his fingers. Tarish watched this silently, his face showing no emotion, and Rika thought that he was like always. The main character said that, of course, it is important to master silent magic. At that moment, he looked serious. He shared with them important things regarding magic. Ainz said that he could teach principles, but each person's learning speed is different. Therefore, it will be difficult for Tarish to quickly master magic. Sophia, with a wide smile on her face, said that she understood. It turns out that she is just a real genius. To which the main character answered negatively. The girl thought to herself that it was cruel on his part. Tarish intervened in the conversation. He closed his eyes and said in an even tone that as far as he was concerned, he already had mastered the martial art. When he opened his eyes, his whole body was tense. He said angrily that he would soon be able to cut down that bad man. Ainz said that it seemed like the guy had a few things left to do, to which he replied that he didn't want to talk about them. Then, the main character, looking straight at him, said that he didn't care about his goals or his past. The guy, like Sophia, was surprised by his words. Ainz smiled sweetly, causing even his eyes to turn into small slits, and said that if he had such a skilled knight on his side, then he would be happy with everything. Night fell. Many bright stars appeared in the sky. The head of the house, Brandy, Kansas, said that the results of the entrance exams would be announced tomorrow. Everyone was sitting at the table and eating dinner. The leader once again emphasized that it had finally happened, after which he asked the main character if he would also go and find out. The latter was eating at the time. Ainz said that it was obvious that Rika had passed the exams, to which the girl replied that if he accompanied her this time, she would buy him whatever he wanted in the cafeteria. Then the eyes of the protagonist sparkled brightly. He said that the girl could rely on him. At that time, Sophia told him that she had received money from the commander. She could also treat him. It was obvious that she was unhappy with this. To this, Ainz calmly said that she was right. That was true, but this time Rika had more to offer him, so they would go together next time. The girl was deeply upset. Rika addressed her servant, calling her Leaf, and then told her to wake up the protagonist tomorrow, and she allowed her to use any methods. To which she responded positively and bowed to her. After some time, the main character got up from the table, said that he was full, and thanked for the food. Sophia got up after him. Rika also turned to the man and said that they would see each other later, to which he called her by name. The man glanced at her sideways and asked her to stay a little. He looked serious. Even the girl herself was surprised by this fact. Kansas was silent at first, and then, closing his eyes, said that it seemed that His Majesty had realized who Ainz really was. Rika was surprised by his words. She assumed that he had behaved that way for a reason at that audience. Her father interrupted her and said that she was right. The prince and the prime minister also knew about what was happening. However, the princess seems to have been told nothing. Kansas suggested that they might not want to tell the girl the whole truth. The head of the family turned to Rika and said that in that case she should continue to be friends with the princess. She smiled and agreed with him. Rika said that she understood everything perfectly, after which she asked him not to worry since she herself did not want to put Kirsha in danger. This answer satisfied the man. He said that everything was fine, after which he added that she could go, to which the girl wished him good night. Then he left the living room. Rika thought that even without knowing Ainz's true identity, staying close to him could still be dangerous. Surely, father should understand that. After which the girl smiled and thought that in any case, she was sure that the prince would be able to protect Kirsha. A new day had arrived. The sun was shining brightly outside. A maid named Leaf entered Ainz's room and told him to wake up, as he had to go with Lady Rika today. However, there was no movement or sound coming from the bed. Then, the girl was silent for a few seconds and called his name again. The man continued to sleep peacefully in his bed. He made vague sounds without opening his eyes, just to react somehow. Leaf said that the gentleman had promised to escort Rika to the Magic Academy. Her tone indicated that he should definitely get up. To which the main character again did not react in any way. He continued to lie in the same place, only at the same time he mumbled something incoherently. Leaf thought that she had no other choice. She would have to take Rika's advice. She addressed him by name and told him that she had kept something from him. The girl said in a serious tone that she actually had magic too. It all looked like she was telling the truth. The main character immediately jumped up on the bed and threw the blanket aside. He excitedly asked her what she was saying. Did she really have magic? To which List calmly replied that it was not so. She said it to arouse his intense interest, thanks to which he immediately stood up. He was clearly dissatisfied with what was happening. After which, the main character wrapped himself back in the blanket and said that it was not nice to lie. He asked her for another hour and wished her good night. To which the maid said that Ainz was leaving her no other choice, after which she ran up to him and sharply pulled the blanket. The girl pulled it towards herself, then she started working on the other bed linen. It happened very quickly. As it turned out, she took all the bedding off the bed, threw some items to the sides, and threw the blanket away. The main character was shocked by what was happening. The maid asked him what he would say now, and then added that this was her special magic, which was called the power of the maid. The main character looked at her with admiration in his eyes, which clearly confused the poor girl. Then he gave in and said that he would get up now. After some time, Sophia asked him with tears in her eyes why he was leaving her again. But Tarish, on the contrary, closed his eyes and said that it was all too much trouble, so he would not go anywhere. The protagonist went outside the estate gates and ran up to Rika, after which he apologized to her for being late. To which the girl replied that she thought he would oversleep, after which she added that it seemed her advice had come in handy for the maid. Ainz immediately asked her if it was really she who advised her to do this, after which he added that she was playing dirty, to which Rika said that at least Leaf was able to pull him out of bed. The protagonist said that it was real magic, and also that Leaf took such a cool pose, and he tried to imitate her. Rika said that she was interested in seeing it. The maid was clearly terribly ashamed of it. Ainz-sama thought about her words about whether the maid was ashamed, and then he himself refuted it, thinking that it was unbelievable. At that moment, the girl said that they were there. There was a huge building in front of them. Rika said with excitement and admiration in her voice that this was the Academy of Magic. A large number of people had already crowded in front of the results board. The girl said that she would go and look at the results, and he should wait for her here, to which the main character agreed. He thought about how busy it was here. Suddenly, someone called him by name and wished him a good morning. The guy immediately turned his head towards the source of the sound. It was the princess. She wished him a good morning and asked if he was accompanying Lady Rika again, to which Ainz addressed them both by name. The princess pouted and said that she asked not to call her mistress, to which Ainz apologized and said about Tom that he was not used to it yet. He had mocked the royal family quite a bit, now he should not anger them even more. Kirsha asked if he had been rude to the king himself. Why did he do it at all? Zidel said that it looked like he would have to teach him a few lessons in good manners, to which Ainz asked to spare him. After this, the main character, with a smile on his face, decided to change the topic of conversation and asked if they wanted to go and check the results. To which the princess replied that she had already looked, and Zidel said that, moreover, almost immediately after the exam, they received a notification about the enrollment of Miss Kirsha, to which Ainz asked why she was here. The princess smiled sweetly at him and said that everything was simple. She wanted to see her name in person on the results table. It was clear that Ainz did not really believe her. He thought about how people in power are divided into two types. Some always boast about their power and put themselves above others, while others, like Mr. Kansas or Rika, understand that with power comes responsibility. The protagonist thought about the princess and that, fortunately, Kirsha clearly belongs to the second type of people. At that moment, Rika ran up to them, joyfully calling the princess by name. She said that she was very happy to see her. Kirsha wished her good morning, after which they held hands, and the girl asked her friend if she had seen the results, what class she was in, to which Rika replied that she was in class A, to which she replied that she was in the same class. After which the girls happily hugged each other. There were happy smiles on their faces. They shouted that they were in the same class. The girls were saying that today was such a wonderful day. They were glad that they were able to meet today. To which Zidel said that he was pleased to see that Mrs. Rika had also passed by. The protagonist grinned. It was obvious how proud he was of himself. He said that it was natural, because he personally trained her. At that moment, Rika called out to them and suggested that they all have lunch together. Ainz asked her to stop. The princess said that she was about to drool. Everyone laughed loudly. Zidel said that it was a great idea, and then asked for permission to talk to Ainz. Soon, using the communication artifact, Zidel contacted His Majesty and asked for his permission. They decided to go to a restaurant on the recommendation of the princess. After some time, dishes appeared on the table in front of them. They looked delicious, like a royal serving. Among them were fish, meat, and various drinks. The protagonist thought that they had a fun time talking and eating delicious food, and then several days passed. The action takes place in the Brandy family mansion. Rika came down the stairs and with a happy smile on her face told her father that she was going. Kansas wished her a good day and then turned to the protagonist and asked him to look after his daughter, to which the latter replied that he need not worry. Sophia told Ainz to be careful. Tarish said that he hoped the day would pass peacefully, otherwise they would have problems again. The head of the house thought to himself that he agreed with this. The main character and Rika were walking down the street. They were already approaching the gates leading to the academy. The girl said that from this moment her new life at the academy begins. They were walking towards the building when Ainz asked the girl if she knew where Class A was, to which she replied positively. Suddenly, the boy noticed something. The main character looked around and realized that there were clots of magical energy floating around. There were so many of them that even he was surprised. Rika turned around and noticed that Ainz had fallen behind, and then called out his name. The latter responded and apologized for that. The main character thought to himself that this was an academy of magic, so there would be traces of magical energy everywhere. He followed the girl towards the school building. Rika resolutely opened the door to the auditorium. Some of the boys were already sitting there. They were located chaotically throughout the room. The main character asked her where their places were, to which the girl said that she needed to look. Looking at the paper, she said that they needed to go up to the very top. As they were climbing, Ainz commented on how the stairs were so long, to which Lady Rika told him to stop complaining already. As they climbed up, they attracted the attention of other students. One of them called out to his comrades and told them to look at them carefully. They were talking about whether it was Rika who had passed all the exams with flying colors. Another person added that she had also shown silent magic. The third person was surprised by these facts and asked if they were serious. The guys loudly said that it was cool. The girl walked and thought to herself that she should not forget that it was Ainz who taught her all this, so she should not be arrogant. However, she was pleased with this. A blush appeared on her face. Having climbed up, Rika noticed that Princess Kirsha was sitting there. She immediately joyfully called out her name, to which the latter also wished her good morning with a smile. Rika said that they not only study in the same class, but also sit next to each other, to which Kirsha replied that they were definitely lucky. At the same time, they held each other's hands, and there were wide smiles on their faces. At that moment, Rika wondered if this was really the prince's doing. The latter, as if he sensed that someone was talking about him, sneezed. At that moment, the main character asked where his seat was, to which he was told that the escorts should stand next to him. Then the guy got indignant and asked if he really couldn't even sit down. Ainz started whining and saying that his legs were so tired, even the prosthetic on his left leg was starting to crack. Rika told him to be more serious. He could stand next to Zadel. The main character started whining about how they wouldn't even let him sit down, after which he turned to his fellow sufferer and asked if everything was okay with him, to which he replied that he was already used to it. Ainz became sad, exhaled, and said that there was nothing he could do. He would have to create a chair for himself. Zadel was surprised by his words. The guy stamped his prosthesis on the floor. After which, before their eyes and the eyes of everyone present in the room, a huge throne appeared. Zadel even shuddered in surprise. His friend in misfortune stood in shock. The princess blushed from the fact that she could see the main character in action again, and Rika, on the one hand, felt proud of him. On the other, she understood that they had attracted too much attention. Ainz sat on the throne saying that it was much better this way. Zadel was shocked by his actions. The students immediately started asking what was going on. Was this really witchcraft, and without a spell, was this some kind of joke? Zadel wondered if it was alchemy. The main character was showing unusual skills again. He definitely never ceased to amaze him. At the same time, he had a smile on his face. Rika, on the contrary, was a little worried about the actions of her escort. She said that for some reason she was not even surprised, and then asked Ainz to make at least the chair a little more modest. The princess admired him. A strong blush appeared on her cheeks. She clasped her hands in front of her and thought about the main character. The latter relaxed as much as possible and thought that he could finally take a nap.